morning and welcome, welcome to the Mike Graham Show. Can we not get this right? I mean, yesterday, Heron in a chair. Yesterday, I wasn't in the chair. Here I am. There we go. Thank you very much indeed. Pooch, also, I'm not in the right place on mine. Need to move over a bit. Should we do it that way?
The wrong way.
No, the wrong way. Here we are. Right, let's start again. 7 o'clock, Wednesday, the 29th of April. It's nearly the end of April. Can you believe it? And there we are. The international clock is showing what time it is in the Chagos Islands. For those of you who are keen observers of these things, it's midday in the Chagos Islands. Maybe it's time we spoke to old Misley Mandarin to see how he's getting on, because we haven't heard from him for a while. You know, Lord Herm has been a bit busy selling out our troops before he can carry on continuing to sell out the Chagos Islanders as well. We've got lots to do this morning, lots and lots of really, really good stories on the front pages. Yesterday, of course, was a red letter day for Keir Starmer. He managed to whip his entire section of troops from the Labour Party into not sending him down the river to be assassinated, politically, of course, we're talking about, to Traitors Gate, which is where I think he should have gone. Instead, they decided not to, with the exception of about 15 Labour MPs, they decided not to send him to the Privileges Committee to make out that he should actually stand for something, an answer for the fact that he alone was responsible for appointing Peter Mandelson as the US ambassador without due diligence, without proper checks on what he had done, and with absolute and utter disregard for democracy. We saw Morgan McSweeney appearing before the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Now, what a weird-looking guy he was. We'll get into that a little bit later on. We also saw Sir Philip Barton, who was about as supercilious a civil servant Mandarin as you could expect anyone to be. And Keir Starmer was now so desperate to cling on to his powerful base as Prime Minister that he has decided to bring Angela Rayner back, apparently, despite the fact that she has not yet been cleared by the tax authorities over the missing tax that she didn't pay over several properties that she seems to own, despite being a socialist. Also, he will literally do anything to continue to remain as Prime Minister. So we shall see. Meanwhile, the polls look worse and worse and worse for him. It looks as though he's going to get absolutely slaughtered on May the 7th, which is only just over a week away. We've also got loads and loads of stuff to show you about the King meeting Donald Trump and spending time with him and making a speech at the joint Houses of Congress. And, of course, all those naysayers who said just a few days ago, oh, you know, wouldn't it be difficult for King Charles if President Trump embarrassed him in front of everybody? Wouldn't it be really bad if Donald Trump made himself look a fool in front of the King? It'd be terrible if he asked a question about, you know, Jeffrey Epstein or Prince Andrew or maybe even Harry and Meghan. What if he made it an embarrassing trip? What if all of those things happened? Well, guess what? None of those things happened because Donald Trump is a smart man, as is the King. And the King actually did very, very well yesterday, I thought, charming his way through all sorts of different situations and making people laugh, making people realise that Britain is indeed a great ally of the United States of America, despite whatever that idiot Keir Starmer wants to say, and basically set aside all of the differences between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump and smoothed the troubled waters of the special relationship and made us actually look proud again to be British. Because we can be proud to be British when you have a king who is very successful, very, very adept at kind of, you know, charming people, both in the houses of politics and also just in general. And so all of that naysaying, all of that kind of ludicrous pearl clutching from the left, who said, oh, you know, Donald Trump's such a beast, he's such a ghastly man that Prince Andrew should never be mentioned and King Charles shouldn't go there. And what about Camilla? What if somebody says something terrible to her? You know, none of it happened. Why? Because once again, if you'd listened to this show, you would have known that it wasn't ever going to happen. Because King Charles is very adept as a diplomat and Donald Trump knows which side his bread is buttered on. And he likes the idea of the royal family being mates of his, and he's never going to do anything to jeopardise their relationships. It's as simple as that. This is not difficult, people. Just stick with what you know. And when you know that you are going to be misled by Sky News, when you're going to be misled by the BBC, when you're going to see pundits on television stations and radio stations telling us all about how unpredictable Donald Trump is. Well, he's only unpredictable because you can't work out what he's going to do. That doesn't make him unpredictable. It just makes you incapable of seeing what he's doing because you're too stupid, because you're too blinded by your prejudice. Brian Cox and his ilk saying basically here's a guy who should be in prison. Brian Cox and his ilk saying things like it wouldn't be a bad thing if Donald Trump was assassinated. I mean, that's how bad it's got in this country. Well, let us speak to the voice of reason this morning. It is Wednesday. It is, of course, the day that we speak to Stephen Barrett, our favourite barrister. Stephen, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
You, again, like me, will not be at all surprised that King Charles's appearances, various ones of them in America, have been flawless, have been funny, have been charming, have been all of the things that we would expect the King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to be able to do.
He's actually done brilliantly. I wouldn't even say that I expected him to be this good. I think he's exceeded my expectations.
Yes.
I think he really has done incredibly well. And I think Queen Camilla also needs praise for her skills and her diplomatic ability and her obvious natural and inherent charm. I think that the two of them have absolutely done us proud. And I think at times people have been unnecessarily unkind to the king or doubted the king. And I'm not saying he's flawless at all. And I'm not saying that there's nothing to criticize, but I think he has done an absolutely outstanding job. For me, really, the peak of it was giving Trump the bell from HMS Trump fought in the Second World War. What a brilliant move.
Yeah,
what
absolutely. And the thing is, Stephen, neither one of us, I think, would ever be described as sycophants, because we're not. We're quite critical of things on a general basis all the time. However, you have to also admire when something is done well and say so. And I think that's why we are, I think, regarded as fair-minded, and why so many people are now watching this show, because we're not inhibited by prior prejudice, if you like. You know, we do not come to a story with a preconceived notion of what it's going to be, or where it's going to go, or what's going to happen, or what could happen. You know, we're not desperately trying to find something negative when there is something positive. Let's have a look, actually. First of all, I've got 3 clips I'm going to show you. The first one, and I think we're going to call it, I'm sorry to do this because this is the inner workings of the engine room. Number 8, I'm going to call it. The Trumps and the King and Queen arrive together. Have a look at this. I find that rather sort of uplifting. I'd feel quite proud watching that. I don't know about you, Stephen.
Yeah, and I'm very pro the special relationship. I'm very pro America. You know, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, we two stand side by side. I'd also like to highlight that I thought that Melania Trump looked absolutely stunning, and she's
gorgeous,
an incredibly graceful, incredibly well dressed lady. That necklace there on Queen Camilla was an absolute knockout, and you just know that's been in the family for a long time. We do this well, you know. This is what we do, and our alliance with America is absolutely at the heart of everything we do. And it depresses me when I see people pile in, particularly on Mr. Trump, who, as far as we are concerned, if you actually just look at the British national interest, he has always protected us. He always lavishes praise on us exceptionally. He's incredibly kind to us. I don't really see the argument from any British person that he's a bad egg on any level. But also, even, you know, our relationship with America will long outlive any president, and is much more important. And you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, even if you hate a particular president. That just isn't on. It's just foolish. I mean, their president's only served 4 years. It's really not very long at all. I mean, sorry, Mike. You and I are quite old in the tooth. 4 years is about time that we could blink an eye through.
Right.
It's just not a very long amount of time. Our relationship with America will always remain our most important relationship. And watching our pomp and circumstance on full display has raised the nation's spirits at a particularly depressing time.
Yes. And one of the things that Charles did very well yesterday, and I'm going to share another couple of clips in a moment, was when he got up initially and said that we're celebrating 250 years of something, or something that happened 250 years ago, or as we say in Britain, just the other day. And everybody laughed because it was charmingly sort of, it was a put down, but it was so graceful that you couldn't help but be sort of flattered by it, even if you were an American, right? But
Mr. Trump was so good in his own speech, where he pointed out that they didn't, immaculately spring to life in 1776. That they built upon a long English history, a tradition of freedom, a tradition of that we all fought for, and our ancestors fought for from 1066. That's what was going on, and that's where America comes from. And I've always adored the fact that Americans always love Magna Carta more than we do.
Yeah,
and it's almost madness. They're almost more proud of our history than we are.
Yes,
we really need to change our ways, because I think I'm now completely fed up of how this country sees itself.
Right,
my entire life, we've basically been told that we need to be ashamed of ourselves and blah blah for this reason and blah blah for that reason. And actually, I think it's about time we had a bit of national pride.
Yes,
and I don't think a little bit of national pride is going to turn us into 1930s Germany. Okay, no. So there's always the argument that's used. Oh, look at you! You've got a flag. You are therefore automatically.
Yes, some kind of maniac. Yeah, I know. You're going to start rounding people up and putting them in concentration camps because you've got a flag. I mean, forget it. Let's have a look at, as you say, the great moment where Charles presented the bell from HMS Trump to the president. Have a look.
And speaking of submarine alliances, there was one particular AUKUS predecessor, launched from a UK shipyard in 1944, that served for the majority of her life attached to the 4th Submarine Squadron in Australia, playing a critical role during the war in the Pacific. Her name? HMS Trump. So tonight, Mr. President, I am delighted to present to you, as a personal gift, the original bell which hung on the conning tower of your valiant namesake. May it stand as a testimony to our nation's shared history and shining future. And should you ever need to get hold of us, well, just give us a ring.
It's just civilized, isn't it? It's sophisticated,
charming.
It's lovely, and you see Trump showing respect there by getting up and walking to the side to get out of the way. This ghastly, horrible, mean, beastly man who actually understands a bit of respect and a bit of protocol and has behaved impeccably.
Yeah, it's incredible, and you're right to then to pick out the fact that he stood up. Because that is what you do as a mark of absolute respect. When somebody who I respect walks into a room, if a lady walks into a room, if a lady stands at a table, you stand up. That's what you do. You don't remain sitting down. No. And President Trump knows this naturally. And he didn't try and insert himself. As you say, he pulled himself almost out of camera shot. He's making this about the event, which is an incredibly gracious thing to do, an incredibly well-mannered thing to do. I mean, when it comes to questions of, I didn't know it was going to be all about President Trump today, but when it comes to questions about President Trump, I like to highlight Baron Trump as well, who appears to be one of the most well-behaved, gracious, good-mannered young gentlemen that has the unfortunate truth of not being English, but he would be proud.
He's immensely tall as well, which helps, I think.
Well, he's just so gracious and absolutely charming, and does everything right. And he was involved in reporting an awful incident of domestic violence and getting that sorted out. He seems to just have basic manners and decency. He defends his mother, who people are ungraciously unkind to for absolutely no reason. They were trying to score points when they're being shot at by bullets and guns. I mean, it's just absurd. I don't understand what has gone wrong. It does seem to me, actually, Mike, that probably the more important thing for us to talk about once in the weeks ahead is that we live among people who I think are unreconcilable. So people who cheered on assassination attempts on their political enemies, I feel life is unreconcilable with those people. I don't know what we're going to do with those people. I don't know how to reconcile with them. You know, there are huge amounts of my political opponents or people who I disagree. I don't even like that phrase. People I disagree with politically, who I find utterly charming, who I get on with incredibly. A Twitter shout out is that Rosie Duffield is one of the most charming ex-Labour MPs you're ever going to meet. This is just, it's not necessary to have this level of sectarian hatred, but we do have this level of sectarian hatred. And at some point we're going to have to deal with it. And I don't know how we deal with it.
Yes. Well, here's how we start to deal with it. And one of the reasons why you didn't know we were going to start like this, and I didn't know we were going to start like this, because that's the beauty of this show. I never really know exactly where we're going to go. But this is a great contrast to lead us into what also happened yesterday here in the UK with the appearance of Morgan McSweeney, the appearance of Sir Philip Barton, and the dreadful anti-democratic events that took place in the Houses of Parliament, where Keir Starmer basically whipped his entire, his own party to protect his arse, effectively. And how irrelevant does he look? Watching that business with the bell and the presentation in Washington, D.C., from the King to Trump, how irrelevant does Keir Starmer look?
Yeah, yesterday, I still haven't processed it fully, Mike. 335 MPs voted to protect a man that we all saw lie to us. Okay, we all watched Keir Starmer lie to us. We all know exactly what happens. Dan Hodges, to his credit, has documented 7 instances of his lying to us in the last couple of weeks. You know, this man is an absolute disgrace. I'd also like to highlight, Mike, that of the 335, one of them was Keir Starmer himself. So he voted, he bothered to walk through the lobbies to protect himself from scrutiny. Yes. This is an absolute joke system.
I mean, wouldn't it have been a great example of, you know, not only intellect, but also kind of slightly humorousness, which he, of course, doesn't have an ounce of, if he had actually voted to send himself down? You know, that would have been funny. Having whipped his entire party to vote in his favour, he could have voted against it and actually gained a little bit of kudos. But he's too stupid and thick and one-dimensional to think of doing something like that.
He's a machine man with a machine mind and a machine heart. He's nothing but an autocrat. He thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. Goodness knows, if you want to paralyze this prime minister, just put him in a hall of mirrors. He probably then can't move. The man is, there is nothing to him. He is, as given that we're talking about the Americans, he is, as the Yanks say, a nothing burger. I mean, there is nothing to him. He's not governing. He has no policies. He has no ideas. He is a moral sewer. He is a known liar who manipulated parliamentary procedure. Now, what I would do, Mike, is criticise Parliament. Yes. Because the House of Commons should not have allowed itself to be so easily manipulated. Right. When it is obviously lied to by an obvious liar, the Speaker should simply discipline them. And instead, we have all this nonsense, which I just want everybody to know, they have invented this rubbish. They have invented this committee procedure rubbish. They have invented the idea that the best system is for them to have the governing party vote on whether or not the Prime Minister should be told off for doing something wrong. And they have created these systems. And ultimately, liability lies with the Speaker of the House of Commons. Yes. And Lindsay Hoyle is absolutely soiling that office. And when I say soiling, it's an old word, it's an old insult, but I hope people still know what it means, because we need sometimes these older words, because they describe behaviour that we've not seen for a very long time. And I've not seen a Speaker of the House of Commons soil the office of the Speaker of the House of Commons in my lifetime.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've seen this. Even we thought Bercow was bad. Is basically how when Lindsay goes, that's going to be the epitaph.
Yeah. I mean, Bercow was sort of slightly vainglorious, but I mean, his biggest sin really was that he just thought he was a really, really clever bloke. And actually, he's not a bad guy. I've met him, and he's actually not a bad guy. He's not a terrible guy. And as you say, Lindsay Hall makes him look positively brilliant. But I did wonder when Lindsay Hall was so quick to announce that he was going to allow this vote to take place, when people thought he might kind of go against it because it was proposed by Kemi Badenoch. I did smell a bit of a rat, and I thought, they're up to something here, because Lindsay Hall would not normally allow something to happen which would be detrimental to Keir Starmer. We know they're good friends. We know that they hang out together. We know that Starmer creeps around the back of the Speaker's chair and has a quiet word in his ear whenever he can in order to make his life easier. And I think Lindsay Hall is a bloody and utter disgrace. But what I found amazing yesterday was the way that it all kind of unfolded on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Most people agreed that both Morgan McSweeney and Sir Philip Barton kind of inadvertently made Starmer look ridiculous because they contradicted everything that he'd previously said. But the thing that really struck me about Morgan McSweeney was how ineffectual and hopeless and weird he looked, and how strangely he spoke, and how, this is a guy who's been painted as, an electoral genius, a man with a brain so big that you could barely get in the same room with him. And he was nothing more than what I would regard as a guy that you'd meet outside a Temple bar in Dublin, asking for money. I don't wish to in any way, detract from the Irish population, many of whom I think are brilliant. But have a look at this. Here he is talking about how Peter Mandelson was not a close friend of his.
Do you think that when the chance came for you to give Peter Mandelson his last job, you stopped thinking about what was best for the government? Really, you stopped thinking about what was best for the country. And you just thought, I want to give this job, this great job, to one of my heroes. And it became an obsession. And it may be that the Prime Minister can be criticised for giving you this leeway, but it was a leeway that you abused. And you stopped thinking strategically. You closed your eyes to the risks. You didn't consult the necessary people, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary. You railroaded this through as fast as you could before anyone could realise what had hit them.
I don't think that's true. I certainly spoke to the Foreign Secretary a number of times. I have then Foreign Secretary. I have a very good relationship with the Deputy Prime Minister. I've known him for very, very many years, and I would certainly have spoken to him extensively at the time. I don't regard Mandelson as a hero. I think that's an exaggeration of the kind of relationship that I had with him. In every advice that I gave to the Prime Minister, hand on heart, I thought I was operating with a motive in the national interest. In politics, you over decades, you know a lot of people. I've had to, in 20 years in politics, I've had to fire friends from jobs. I've had to turn people down who were desperate for jobs, who were closer friends of mine than Mandelson's, who really wanted jobs in Number 10, or people who thought they were going to be ministers, because I've always tried to operate in national interest. The amount of times I've had friends come and see me or phone me who were really angry at me because they didn't get the job that they wanted to get. That's what politics is. You have to try and always operate in the national interests. Of course, you know people, and then you make judgments that in this case turned out to be wrong, incorrectly. I completely accept that, but it was this was not some hero I was trying to get a job for. I thought that his skills as an EU Commissioner would help us to get the trade deal that I think the country needed, because we were very, very exposed after Brexit, and getting that trade deal right was very important. I thought he had the skills to do it. I made the wrong judgment. I completely accept that, but my motive was always in the national interest.
I mean, it does make you beggar how on earth these people find themselves in these positions of power. I mean, he's literally talking as though he is the man who nominates who does what in running the government, who gets a job in a plum situation, who then has massive influence over how our lives are dictated to by these people. And I just thought to myself, who on earth does this little snivelling, egotistical rat, as Farmer Guy just called him, who does he think he is?
Yeah, tiny little dweeb, the wee man there.
Yeah.
But what this is, Mike, is what we discovered after the collapse of the USSR. You know, we who were outside the USSR thought that they were terribly impressive, terribly scary.
Yeah.
President Reagan genuinely felt that they were economically winning.
Yeah.
He was worried about all sorts of things, you know, and we were all terribly scared of their competence and the illusion of them. And then after it fell, we saw just how pathetic the entire thing was.
Yeah.
And that's what they are. They are nothing but bureaucratic dweebs, tiny wee men who have no. I mean, look at him. He looks about 12. He looks he's badly dressed, you know. And I'm one to talk. They could say, and I go, well, that's fine, but I'm not purporting to run the country. You know, this man is just.
Well, you're far more stylish, Stephen. I'm sorry, I won't have that. You're far more stylish than McSweeney would ever dream of being in a million years. You know.
Well, he's just a nothing burger again. He's just a complete waste of space. He's not sinister. But again, I would point out that this is all manufactured theatre. Just as you had suspicions about Lindsay Hoyle, who I think has soiled the office of Speaker. I'm going to say that again. Emily Thornberry there. Do you know how she voted last night?
Yeah, she voted to
she was with the 335. Yeah, the disgraceful. So this is all just an absolute pantomime.
Yeah.
An absolute pantomime that they all agree to. And I still think that the Prime Minister has a humiliation fetish.
Yes.
And all I could draw from that clip of the tiny wee man there is that he probably has a humiliation fetish too.
Yeah.
And maybe we should run ourselves in a way that we don't allow pathetic, weak men with fetishes anywhere near government office. Maybe we should just run ourselves in a better way. But that I strongly suspect, by the way, on Emily, is why he wasn't nailed on the phone. Because we all know, or we all know that the phone wasn't stolen.
Right.
So he wasn't grilled on that, wasn't he? He wasn't nailed.
He wasn't. Finally, there was a question from John Whittingdale, but it came after about 2 hours of intensive kind of, boring, waffle about process and, pedantry and when he said this and who said that to him. And let me show you, because McSweeney on this really gives himself away as a complete and utter liar and charlatan. This is number 12, I think, Pooch.
Yeah. Not make it clear that this wasn't just an ordinary theft. This was a phone which was likely to contain highly sensitive information.
So, the dates are slightly incorrect. My phone wasn't stolen on the 20th of March. My phone was stolen on the 20th of October. So it was 4 months before. I gave up my government phone pretty much as soon as I left. Within a couple of days, I handed all my kit back to number 10. My phone was stolen on the 20th of October. I was a victim of crime. Somebody hopped onto the pavement and took my phone from me. The first thing I did was to try and retrieve it. I tried to chase, which was probably a mistake. The next thing I did was I phoned number 10, and I would have gone with whatever they told me to do. Now, I thought at the time that they would be able to track the phone, and that's what would happen, given, as you say, what's potentially on that phone, and that was my assumption. I then called 999. If number 10 had told me you need to tell the police or you need to tell the call handler what your job is, I would have done so. But otherwise, I didn't do that as a matter of course. I didn't, in any part of my job, go around saying I'm a very serious and senior person. If number 10 had asked me to do that, I would have done that. I also thought, wrongly again at the time, I thought a squad car might come by and I could explain a bit more if the squad car had come by. And then I made further phone calls to number 10 where I'd hoped that they could track the phone and I could tell the police where that phone was. And like you, and like...
I mean, sorry.
Just a liar. Just a
sorry.
liar.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a lie detector, it'd be going... I mean, you can tell when someone's lying. You're a barrister. You've been in front of plenty of people who've told you lies, and you can tell when they're lying. I'm a journalist. I've been doing this all my life, and I can tell when people are lying. He's lying. It's as simple as that. The phone was never stolen, which is why the police can't find the CCTV footage of it being stolen, despite the fact that the street in which it was stolen is covered in cameras, which is why they're also now apparently going into number 10 to ask everybody in there if they know anything about what happened to the phone.
Yeah, if number 10 had told him to breathe in, then he would have breathed in. And if number 10 had told him to breathe out, then he would. What a pathetic joke of a human being. This argument is pathetic. But they now lie to us through this detail. And throughout this entire process, it's just been drowning in detail. And I think, again, this is an instance where people, the ordinary public's own basic decency is used against them.
Yeah.
Basically, they sit there and they start from the premise that, oh, well, these people must be decent on some level. So I'll listen to them. I'll give them a fair hearing.
Yeah.
And then they're just lied to and drowned in process to the point of boring them into submission. You know, that's basically their only plan. These dweebs of human beings, these absolute, 12-year-olds in their dad's suits, who are a complete waste of time. The fundamental problem for our country is that none of this is going to fix any of the very serious problems we have. Fundamentally, yes, we've got a bunch of lying shysters who are basically just nicking our money at the center of government. But that's not the real problem. The problem is that whilst they are there, nothing is going to get fixed.
Right.
We are in a very serious situation. Companies are going bust left, right, and center. Our energy costs are the highest in the world. This is absolutely insane. Oh, one of your super chats has pointed out the way the camera kept moving. Yeah, I think that there's a point to make, is that was clearly AI focusing, and the AI kept deciding that the man who wasn't saying anything behind Morgan McSweeney was more interesting than Morgan McSweeney. And to be perfectly honest, I agree. Yeah. Throughout that entire charade, throughout the farcical testament in which but also the MPs are not capable of grilling people. They're not capable of cross-examination. They're not capable of their job. They ask long-winded questions. You don't do that, Mike. You hammer someone down. You pin them down. This is why the great mystery of my life is why everybody who admittedly they're all conservatives goes on and on about how brilliant Kemi Badenoch is at PMQs, and it's like, no, she's completely rubbish. She keeps failing to pin anyone down. If she can't beat Keir Starmer, she's rubbish.
Well, imagine, do you remember last week? I think it was on the Monday when he came in to answer the questions about what he had done and when he had done it and all of that, and she asked him 6 questions in a row before she allowed him to answer one. Instead of going, here's the first question, 1, answer that, 2. And then working on the answer, how you tailor the second question. Having worked on the way he answers the second question, you tailor the third question. Instead of which he just splurged out 6 questions, which meant he didn't have to answer any of them. I mean, it's a pretty basic legal technique, isn't it?
It should be for anybody competent. But again, both the major parties have got themselves into this position because they've just hired people, they've promoted people on the basis of loyalty to the cult, willingness to say or do anything, no principles, just be loyal, go on Twitter and pretend that Kemi Badenoch's a seriously impressive person. Don't mention that she's not that bright and really not that capable and looks a bit lazy. But this is, you can't fix a country this way. You do actually have to say things that people don't want to hear if you're going to be honest. You do actually have to roll up your sleeves and do some hard work if you actually want to fix things. You can't just sit there like a little dweeb and expect the country to automatically get better. It's not going to. Our country... And the one thing, probably, maybe I've been a bit vitriolic towards Kemi. Let me explain to
I don't think so.
I'm really upset when she said that Britain's not broken. It is. Yeah. It's absolutely broken. I will go from this place to another place, and I will see graffiti everywhere. Yeah. I will see litter everywhere. I will be at risk of crime. I will be at risk of being a victim of crime. Like the tiny dweeb wasn't. Yeah. And this is just how we have to live our lives right now, and it's absolutely shocking. I will pay sky-high energy bills, as will everybody watching this. I will pay ridiculous amounts of food. My lunch will cost me 15 quid for a boring sandwich and a bit of fruit. This is we are living through absolute collapse of rule of law and a broken country, a country I love that is absolutely on its knees. And Kemi Badenoch stood there and said, Britain's not broken.
And she thinks, but the reason for her to say that is again, a sort of a paucity of intellectualism, because she thinks by saying Britain is broken, you're somehow being unpatriotic. Quite the reverse. You're being patriotic by saying it's broken because you want to fix it. You know, to pretend that it's fine because that's more patriotic is a nonsense. And it's a sort of primary school mentality, isn't it?
It's absolutely absurd. It is betraying the country to pretend that Britain is not broken. Now, I shouldn't just keep firing at Kemi because, you know, the real... there's a word I use on Twitter that I probably shouldn't use here to describe the Prime Minister, and that's the level that we've got to. But the real baddie is ultimately the Prime Minister, who is clinging on to office despite the fact that he is a liar. He's appointed people without vetting. By the way, people keep missing this, but appointing what's his name, the National Security Advisor,
Jonathan Powell, yeah. It turns out he wasn't.
A massive scandal.
He wasn't vetted either. And when they asked whether or not even Morgan McSweeney was vetted, I mean, he didn't give a very satisfactory answer on that either. You know,
no,
it's unbelievable.
No, and Hermer and Starmer persecuting veterans, also a massive scandal.
Yeah.
So many scandals ago, and one of the pains for me that people probably miss, because again, there's just so much rubbish going on. Let's use the word rubbish to be polite in the air at the moment. Is that Tulip Siddiq spoke in favour of the Prime Minister. Tulip Siddiq, who has twice been found guilty in Bangladesh of corruption, who really should
She's been sentenced to 3 years in jail. You know, her auntie has been found guilty of war crimes and has been sentenced to death, for heaven's sake, you know?
And to have her speak in defence of Keir Starmer, it's just like, who are you people? And it really feels like we're at the stage where they're just rubbing our noses in it, Mike.
Yeah, I know. It is absolutely and utterly ridiculous. I'm going to finish up with one final happy moment from America. And this is Charles talking about the history of the two nations and a shared kind of, you know, love of Europe. Have a look.
This said, our French friends can feel equally at home with a glance at a map. Indeed, you recently commented, Mr. President, that if it were not for the United States, European countries would be speaking German. Dare I say that if it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking French.
Brilliant. Just brilliant, isn't it?
It was brilliant, and he's an incredibly gifted speaker, the king, and he's very funny and a very charming man. But we do forget Napoleon Bonaparte. Yeah. We do forget that tyranny and that evil, and that again we did beat that.
Yes.
And we again, I worry about our young people and what the version of Britain that they are taught. You know, this is absolutely something to be incredibly proud of. We should never stop being proud of Nelson. Yeah. Never. You know, Trafalgar matters. It was an incredible victory against absolute tyranny that should have crushed us. But we somehow won. It's incredible what Wellington did, beating this monumental machine. And evil always comes in the form of a systemized machine. You know, that's what it does. That's what Napoleon was. Sure, he was just a tiny little wee man. Yeah. But, you know,
a bit like Starmer.
A lot like Starmer, but behind him was this machine that was crushing everybody. It was mechanical. It's in the Great Dictator speech that Charlie Chaplin gives. You know, it's what Hitler was. It's this automated machine with tiny little men, weak men who are angry, who stand behind it. And always our country, our nation has stood against this idea. We have stood for freedom, for democracy, for the right of everybody to eat beef. I know it probably sounds pathetic to viewers, but who can all just go to the shops and get beef. But access to beef has been the prime luxury, human luxury good for the last 6,000 years. You know, these are important fundamentals. The idea that ordinary people can access luxury. Sure, they don't get to live in it 24/7, although I'd like us to move further further towards that possibility. But the idea that ordinary people can access luxury is a very British idea, because these mechanized people, these dictators, sure, they want luxury on tap 24 hours a day. And Keir Starmer wants to fly privately around the world constantly, as far as I can tell.
Right.
You know, they all want, Morgan McSweeney will have enjoyed the absolute highest levels of luxury. I'm sure the restaurant from which his phone was stolen will be a fantastically glamorous one that we paid for. These people always want to live in luxury themselves. What is an English idea and a British idea is that ordinary people should be allowed to access luxury, should be able to do that through their own hard work and acumen. When Napoleon called us, he tried to insult us by calling us a nation of shopkeepers. And we all just went, well, I'm quite proud to be a shopkeeper. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we must remember.
Just pay for your items before you leave, please. Thank you very much indeed. You know, that's it. Stephen, as ever, brilliant to talk to you. Great to see you. We'll see you this time next week. But also, we will see you this time next week in the evening for the Mike Graham and Friends show, which is going to be fantastic. And we've got one question for you that's come in from Salty. Will Stephen, basically, the question is, will you straighten your lamp, the one that's behind you, when Starmer resigns?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe if Starmer resigns, I'll do it. But at the moment, my lamp is living its best life.
I think so. It can identify in any way it wishes. And also, finally, a lot of people saying they're really enjoying your podcast with Nunziata Rees-Mogg. So give yourself a plug.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, so Opinionata, Rees-Mogg and I do a YouTube video because we don't know how to publish it anywhere else. It comes out on a Thursday. We film it on a Wednesday, so next week's not going to work. Right. But it comes out for me on a Thursday. I think she puts out on a Friday. We're having a great deal of fun doing it. We're both right-wing, so there's no lefty nonsense. But that's just boring. I mean, everybody knows the left-wing opinions already. We don't agree with each other. We don't agree on political parties, so we're open about that, because I'm in the Reform Party and she's in the Conservative Party, and we do squabble. And I'm going to have a bit of a go of a tonight about something already, I've decided, because I'm not terribly happy with CCHQ right now. But so there are issues that come up, but it's generally just an honest appraisal, completely honest, because we have no preparation. We just go bang, film it in one shot, and that's what Annunciata Rees-Mogg and I do. It's called Too Right, Damn Right.
Good stuff.
Brilliant. You can find it on our YouTube channels.
Fantastic. Well, Stephen, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Enjoy it tonight. We'll see you same time next week. And of course, as I say, Stephen Barrett will be with us at the beginning of the live show that we're doing. If you haven't got a ticket yet, please go and get one from Ticketmaster. It's Mike Graham and Friends. It's at Shepherd's Bush Empire, Wednesday evening, the 6th of May, the eve of the elections, believe it or not, which are going to hopefully chase Keir Starmer not only down the road, but out of the country, if all goes well. Coming up, we can speak to Chris Rose. We've got... should we go straight to Chris? Okay, let's go straight to Chris Rose. David Maddox is coming up later. Sarah Pochin is going to be around as well. Plus, we'll get Lewis Schaefer's take on the King's visit to the United States of America. Chris, very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Good to see you. We got loads to talk about this morning, but I guess what we should do first is have a look back at this terrible, terrible day yesterday for democracy, which is what I'm calling it, because we had the Prime Minister of this country whipping his own troops, if you like, into kind of basically believing his lies and making sure that he doesn't get scrutinised by the parliamentary process. You had the Speaker of the House going along with it. I think there were only 15 rebel MPs, all of whom we could name, but we don't really need to. They're all people that don't like him. But what a terrible, terrible day for our country, I think.
Absolutely. And I think what annoys me the most is the hypocrisy. Because if Boris or a Reform PM was in this position, he would absolutely want them to be referred to the Privilege Committee. No doubt about it. He called yesterday an absolutely shameful day. And you know what? It just shows that Labour MPs, they've done more to protect Keir Starmer than they have with pensioners, veterans, our farmers, young people, women and children. You know, they've done more to protect a PM who has misled Parliament and broken the ministerial code. I mean, it shows that they are actually much worse than the Tories they often criticised in the past. I mean, and I can't wait till May the 7th, because it's going to be an absolute Labour bloodbath for them. It'll be an example of what's going to happen in the next general election, because they are not going to survive this. They may think, oh, yeah, well, have a brief period where we back Keir Starmer, but in the long run, it'll make things much worse for.
Absolutely right. And I mean, we've now got a ridiculous situation where Starmer is so desperate to cling on to power that he's willing to do almost anything to hold on to it, and including, by the way, bringing back Angela Rayner, apparently.
Exactly. I mean, that's another thing of double standards as well, where he would absolutely not accept a Tory PM bringing back somebody who had to resign in disgrace over, tax dodging. It just kind of shows the double standards he has for him and everyone else. I mean, was it one rule for them, another rule for everyone else that he used to say so regularly? I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. And that's the thing about this government, is the striking hypocrisy is the thing that people hate the most. That's what voters hate. The British public do not like hypocrisy of this scale. And, it's so brazen that it doesn't even try to hide it anymore. Bringing back Anne Rayner is just the wrong direction. And because I think she criticised Shabana the other day because she wanted to go through with her immigration reforms, which, don't even really touch the surface, but they're closer to what I would want. But, bringing back her they're trying to, fight the Greens, but in the long run, they end up alienating other voters who actually want, something to be done with immigration in the long run.
Yeah. But also, it shows that not only does he not care about, the people of this country, and he only cares about his own survival, but that he doesn't actually have any kind of political guidance going on in his own brain. Because Angela Rayner, as far as most people in this country is concerned, is too far left for anybody to actually vote in as a leader or have in the cabinet. But he thinks because it might help a portion of his supporters to believe that he should stay on, he's willing to do it. It's almost as though if somebody said to him, look, if you run naked down Whitehall in order to save yourself having to leave Downing Street, he would do it. He would do anything.
He absolutely would. I mean, he's a man who just seems to come across as if he doesn't know what he's doing, or he just goes along with any advice, doesn't really think for himself, for a man who's meant to be forensic, or a man who's meant to have the intelligence of a profound lawyer. I mean, it's just bringing back Angela Rayner. She's just not really the image Labour really want at the moment, or any time really. Yeah. I mean, she's one of the people who's probably going to contend with him for the leadership election in the near future. So he's just using it just to possibly, keep her at bay, keep your enemies closer, as the old saying is said. But it still won't work. These people are still going to go for, his job very soon, I imagine, possibly after 7th, once they see the disaster that is unfolded. 21 months after they won a massive majority in a general election, to be at this stage already, it just shows how shambolic they are.
Well, that's right. And the whole party actually looks ridiculous now, because I think it was Dan Hodges who made the point yesterday that, until today, this was the Mandelson saga, and the Mandelson scandal was Keir Starmer's scandal. It's now the entire Labour Party scandal, because they've sort of adopted ownership of it now, because even they are now complicit in the cover-up, because every single member of the Labour government who voted yesterday to keep Starmer out of trouble is now complicit in the cover-up, aren't they?
Absolutely. All of them. Was it 335 Labour MPs are now involved in the cover-up? And they're going to get an absolute blitz of literature in their constituency that will remind people of what they said in the past and what they said now, defending Keir Starmer, how they've put party above country. Where, back in 2022, they said they would put country before party when they're in opposition, but now they're in power, they've done the complete opposite. And, they won't, as I say, escape this. They're now part of it. They're guilty by association now, because they've played their part. They said, we're going to do something that we would never have, like the Tories to do. They would have came down with all hell and fire and wrath if the Tories ever did this. But they've just gone and done it. There's no good. I've not heard a good reason to actually back Keir Starmer other than putting their party first.
No. Well, we heard all the stuff before the last couple of days, didn't we, over the weekend as well, of all these MPs turning out in favour of Keir Starmer, basically saying things like, well, nobody's talking about Peter Mandelson anymore. They want to know about what's happening in the Middle East. They want to know about how much their petrol's going to cost. They want to talk about, the cost of living. They don't care about Peter Mandelson. Well, I'm sorry, that's simply not true. And there's one woman who has been brilliant throughout all of this, and you've probably seen her on TV, Her name is Saoirse Eastwood. She's a Northern Ireland MP from the Alliance Party. Here's what she had to say about it all yesterday.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just want to put two things on record here before I commence my remarks. So the Labour Party don't stand for election in Northern Ireland. We do not have elections next week or the week after. So everything I'm about to say has got absolutely nothing to do with a so-called political stunt, but everything to do with the integrity of this House. And by the way, I find patronising the context that we shouldn't be discussing these things because the government of the day want to get on with the cost of living. I have had 2 car bombs at the edges of my constituency in the last 5 weeks, so believe me, there are much bigger things that I would prefer to be talking about at this time. However, it is incumbent upon everybody in this House to make sure that everything we're doing is completely above board. Now, last week, I posed the question, I don't know why Mandelson was appointed. Prime Minister then said it was a mistake. But here's what I don't understand. Everything that was out there about Mandelson that would have been cause for concern was open source material. It was out there. Peter Mandelson wouldn't have survived the vetting for a kids' football club. And rightly so.
That's it. I mean, that says it all. He would not have passed a CRB check, never mind, working with kids or working with a school. And yet, here he is, having not... And we don't even know now... I mean, they're now muddying the waters to such an extent. We don't even now actually know what the vetting procedure is. It seems to be, well, we'll try and vet you, but it looks as though you might not pass. So we might tell people that you might not pass, but we might not actually go all the way through with making sure that you don't pass. And then suddenly here you are getting the job anyway. What's the point of the vetting procedure?
Exactly. It just seems an absolute farce. I mean, as we've seen in the last couple of days, 2 people who worked with the vetting procedure have pretty much told us what Ollie Robbins said, that pressure was applied, and Keir Starmer in Parliament said that no pressure whatsoever had been applied. So, he has misled the House on multiple occasions. But we found out that pressure was applied. They wanted Peter Mandelson to be the one who got the appointment beforehand, and they just tried to make it work as if he would, his vetting was appropriate, but it wasn't. We know that now. I love the line where she said, "Oh, he wouldn't have passed a kids' football team or whatever," because it's true. They can't really look at us in the face and say, "Oh, yes, it was done appropriately," where we can see that it wasn't. We don't even have to look into much detail to see that it wasn't done properly. Right. We also know that already. I mean, the information was laid out in front of everyone. But it's another case of Keir Starmer saying, "I don't know, nothing passed my desk." I mean, does he ever look at his desk? Because over the last 2 years, he doesn't seem to know anything. I mean, has anyone told him that he's the Prime Minister or anything? Because he doesn't seem to be, clock onto anything at all.
No, it's extraordinary, isn't it, that we've got this government now who have been paralysed by this entire issue for the best part of the last 10 days. I don't know what else they've done. I mean, there's a story in The Sun today, which I think you'll have an interest in, page 17, shock official figures, basically coming from the Office for National Statistics, who basically say in the next 8 years, there will be 2.2 million extra migrants coming into this country. 7.2 million will immigrate long-term to the UK between 2024 and 2034. 5 million will emigrate long-term from the UK in the same period. So loads of people will move out of the country who will be presumably likely to be British. 7.2 million people will come in who will presumably likely be not British, which will change the face of Britain even further than it's already been changed.
Exactly, and they're not really on top of it because they're so emboldened by crisis after crisis that they can't really focus on these important issues that will change the face of Britain in the long run.
Right.
I mean, the people who are leaving are most likely people who are, taxpayers, British people, entrepreneurs, possibly younger people as well. We're having a massive brain drain as usual, and we're going to bring in people who are not really here for the right reasons. Probably they're probably going to be, once they're eligible, going to say, "Oh, we're going to go on universal credit, so we've got more people for taxpayers to provide for as well through our taxes, which will go up in the end if we have to provide for more people. And it's not sustainable because we have, a housing shortage as well. So where they're going to live, for example, are these people actually, past like a good vetting system? Because Labour doesn't really seem that bothered about vetting. Are they people who are going to contribute anything at all? We don't really know that at all. They've not said anything. Then I don't think that I've seen anyone in the government actually speak about this issue. To be honest, I don't think they've given a speech or even wrote a post about it. I think it's the sort of thing that they would want, because in the long run, it's probably more voters for them that they're bringing in. So they don't think they're bothered really.
No, exactly. It's a shocking state of affairs. It really is. Chris, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Chris Rose there checking in with us on his view of what happened yesterday, where Labour MPs were all whipped basically to clear Starmer. That's what it says on the front pages this morning. Labour MPs whipped to clear Starmer feel complicit in the cover-up. And so they should. Labour revolt over Starmer's sleaze cover-up, says the front page of the Daily Mail. 14 MPs side with the Tories, dozens abstain in Mandelson vote. The question, I suppose, is, despite the fact that he appears to have been saved for the short term, what are the long-term prospects for this Prime Minister and how he proceeds from this moment on? Let's talk to David Maddox, of course, from the I newspaper, one of the people who, of course, was key in the run-up to this particular vote, because he was the man who said, way back when, in September, October of last year, that Peter Mandelson, he believed, had failed the vetting process. And ever since then, David, you've been very much a man in demand, as you should have always been, in my view. But very good morning to you. Welcome.
Morning, Mike.
The question, I suppose, is what happens now? Because, Starmer would appear to be so desperate to cling on to power that he'll do practically anything. I mean, I said to Chris Rose, though, if somebody said to him, would you run naked down Whitehall today in order to safeguard your premiership, he'd probably do it.
It is. It's one desperate move after another. Let's just get this right as well. They weren't voting on his guilt or innocence yesterday. They were just voting to allow an investigation. The precedent here is what happened with Boris Johnson. The Tories did not oppose it. They didn't even insist on a vote. They just nodded it through to allow the investigation to happen into Boris. And, the Tories on that committee did their job fairly and, found Boris guilty. They put, as one MP was putting it to me, they put integrity before party.
Yes.
The literal opposite happened yesterday, whereas, Labour put party before integrity. And there are a few Labour MPs, I think, asking themselves whether it was worth it. The shame on you tweets have already started. Inevitably naming Labour MPs and identifying the ones who, quotes, complicit in the cover-up. And this is going to dog them for a long time, well beyond probably Keir Starmer's own survival.
Yeah, and they kept trying to say at the weekend, didn't they, trotting out various people like Darren Jones and Stephen Kinnock and others to say, this is not a big issue. Nobody's talking about Mandelson. Nobody's interested. It's all a political stunt which is being organised in order to skew the results of the local elections. Well, I don't think Labour have got a prayer in the local elections unless I'm missing something. And it certainly doesn't seem as though the people of this country don't think that the Mandelson scandal is important.
Well, pity the poor people who are standing as council candidates or, people for the Welsh Assembly and or the Scottish Parliament, because they're the ones who are, immediately going to lose out as a result of all this. And no, they haven't got a prayer. And, a lot of these kind of ministers are being trotted out to, one suspects are people who might not have a job with an alternative leader. An alternative prime minister, so of course they're going to defend to the death their boss, and I suppose, to a certain degree that's their job. But it's as I say, this is really desperation. It's linked to sack anybody who can maybe take the blame. Morgan McSweeney did Keir Starmer a huge favour yesterday by going and giving evidence and basically saying it was me, Gov, blame me. I wonder what he's been promised down the line. frankly.
But I thought he was very unconvincing, and I haven't spoken to anyone who listened to what he had to say who believed a word of it, particularly when he started talking about how his phone got stolen and how he didn't do anything about it because Number 10 didn't tell him to do it, and he didn't tell the police that he was, a senior member of Downing Street staff because they didn't tell him to do it. This whole kind of nonsensical defence, which is, nobody told me to do that. It's like, this guy was painted before the election and after the election in July of 2024 as some kind of political genius, He didn't come across as that yesterday, which tells me either he's not a political genius or he was pretending not to be a political genius. Either way, he's a very unbelievable and not credible source as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I mean, the person who kind of looked most incredulous about what he was saying, it was Dame Emily Thornberry, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, who clearly looked as though she was struggling to believe what he was saying. I mean, especially when he sort of was saying that Peter Mandelson wasn't a mentor, wasn't a hero of his, wasn't involved in selecting candidates, wasn't involved in organising the reshuffle last year, just before he got sacked. And, it's, I was getting messages from Labour MPs who just said, we just don't believe. I mean, it's just shocking. He may be telling the truth. He will know, but not many people seem to believe that he was.
No, and that is the problem. Let's have a look at what Philip Barton had to say. He was obviously on first, and we covered a bit of this live yesterday at 9 o'clock. But this is him talking about the whole Mandelson scenario.
I had a concern at the time, was a part of me that had a concern at the time that I don't know anything that wasn't in the public domain. Obviously, we know now a lot more about Mandelson's links to Epstein, but I had a concern that a man who, demonstrably from the public record at the time, and it's clearly much bigger than we all knew, had a link to Epstein, and that Epstein, through both the presidential election campaign in the US and more generally in US politics, had been and was a controversial figure. And I was worried that this could become a problem in future, not because I was expecting that we were going to find out more, because to be honest, I wasn't, and who would necessarily know, but much more, I just thought that it was a potentially difficult issue politically in the United States. So that is a very candid account of probably what I was thinking at the time. But there was no space or avenue or mechanism for me to put that on the table. A decision had been taken, and it was a political decision.
I mean, you mentioned, of course, the links to Jeffrey Epstein, which were in the media at the time. Did you have concerns about Mandelson's business relationships with China or Russia?
So please don't laugh, but I really didn't actually follow what Mandelson was up to in his business relationships. I kind of knew about him when he was a government minister, so I didn't sort of have it right in front of my face, and I didn't see the due diligence report. What the details of those were. What I would always believe in is a vetting process to look at issues which might affect national security.
I mean, some people, David, have been sort of glazing over at some of the kind of, internecine detail of how this vetting procedure appears to have worked. But I thought Philip Barton was quite good yesterday in the sense that he was totally straight with the committee, in which he said, look, I had an issue with Mandelson. I didn't think he was a good choice, but I was never consulted, despite the fact that he was in charge of basically placing diplomats around the world for the Foreign Office. I mean, that was his job, and they didn't bother to consult him because they wanted him to get the job, and they didn't want anybody getting in the way of it, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite clear from what Philip Barton said that it was a fait accompli. He found out on the 15th of December, just before it be a formal announcement. He hadn't been consulted at all. There had been no discussion at all. He had no opportunity to raise any difficulties. That was it. And I get back to a point, the security vetting story is a very serious one and very problematic for a Prime Minister. But he didn't need security vetting to know that Peter Mandelson was a disastrous choice. All he needed, most of this, 99% of this, he could have found out, or people could have found out with a Google search or just a decent memory. it was that the Epstein links were there, the China links were there, the Russia links were there. Everything was there. There should have been red flags all over the place. I mean, the fact Philip Barton wasn't able to raise issues about Epstein is just shocking. But, it kind of harks back to a kind of culture of secrecy around the Starmer government. I mean, there was evidence from Philip Barton yesterday, adding on to the Ollie Robbins stuff from last week, about how they were being told not to tell the Foreign Secretary things, David Lammy. I'll tell you what, if I was David Lammy this morning, I'd be feeling seriously miffed that so much was being kept secret from him. I mean, it's, the level of distrust there is astonishing.
Yeah, absolutely. But it also gives an indication of how closely knit the inner circle of Keir Starmer is. I mean, it was said over the weekend, I think Dan Hodges wrote it, that he doesn't speak to very many people. He actually came out in one, I think the Cathy Newman interview, and said, I've been speaking to members of the cabinet a lot lately, almost as though he doesn't normally do that. He doesn't normally speak to anybody on the back benches, except when he wants them to save his arse. He doesn't normally speak to anybody outside of his little, triumvirate of advisors, and clearly Morgan McSweeney and he were as thick as thieves. And so, we suddenly have this kind of view of a government which, as you say, is one, secretive, two, unwilling to take advice from anybody outside of the tight-knit group that they believe they're running the country with. Morgan McSweeney yesterday gave the impression of a guy who was running the world. And you kind of go, well, who told you were in charge, matey? You're not in charge. You're simply an aide to the Prime Minister. You should not be dictating what the country should be like, how the country should be improved, which people should be given responsibility for making it better. It's nothing to do with you. Just do your bleeding job.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I remember being at the party conference last year, and I know a couple of papers have run this story as well. But one cabinet minister told me that there's only one minister who is welcome at the Downing Street flat, whoever gets to go into the private part of Downing Street to have a chat with Keir Starmer. And that one minister is Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, who seems to have immense power in this government. And of course, we saw with the Troubles Bill and all the rest of it, all sorts of question marks around that, and the Chagos Islands and things like that. And that, though, has caused serious concern amongst cabinet ministers already.
Yes.
I mean, I just wonder how long this continues. He doesn't have many political friends, if any, at the moment. He has ministers who are kind of reliant on him staying there to actually stay in the job themselves. But, there's not much loyalty, and he burnt really a lot of his political capital yesterday.
No, indeed. And a lot of the papers this morning saying that, it is literally in the last chance saloon because a lot of the people who voted for him in his favour yesterday are already regretting it because it looks like they're being accused of being part of the cover-up. We've got a police investigation into Morgan McSweeney's phone. Supposedly the Metropolitan Police are going into Downing Street to ask questions of people about what they knew at the time about the stolen phone and what they can tell them. We know that the election results are going to be devastating for Starmer on Thursday of next week. We also know that there's going to be more paperwork coming out about Mandelson and his appointment in the coming weeks after that. So, I mean, I just don't see the point of Starmer at the moment, and in the future. He's done. He's toast. So why doesn't he just go?
Well, I suppose there is a point to him at the moment. If you're a would-be leader of the Labour Party, if you're Angela Rayner or Ed Miliband or Wes Streeting or whoever, that Starmer is kind of the lightning rod for all this dreadful stuff that is about to happen to the Labour Party. So he's going to have to own those awful, let's not take the voters for granted, but what look like will be awful election results next week. He's going to have to, explain what's in these latest tranche of documents or what's not, interestingly enough. The fact that his comments have been excluded so far on paperwork is slightly worrying. So all these problems are going to land on Keir Starmer. But at some point, Labour MPs are going to have to make a decision about whether they want somebody who can pick up the pieces or not.
Well, yeah, because the government's in paralysis. It can't do anything. There's no policy being made. There's no work being done. I mean, last weekend, he spent all weekend at Chequers, war gaming how he was going to survive with the likes of Darren Jones and Yvette Cooper and David Lammy and all of that. So there's nothing actually, there is no business of government going on, is there?
Well, given that he doesn't want to tell David Lammy anything, I wondered if he'd locked David Lammy in one of the other rooms. I mean, it was like...
Just put him in the kitchen. He keeps him busy.
No, could he just, go out in my garden for a minute, just have a chat? It's, it's like, I mean... the one thing that he's been praised for by Labour MPs is something where he's done nothing, which is to not go into the war with Iran with Donald Trump. Now, there are pros and cons to that. I mean, he's probably come
except he has, though.
Well, he has, but it was to say no is the one thing he can do, because actually it's much difficult to actually do something.
But he only said no for about a week, and then he said yes. So, I mean, it's completely disingenuous to make out that he made the right decision, he didn't take us into a war. Well, we're already in the bleeding war, so where does that leave us?
Yeah, well, I mean, he kind of said yes, yes, I mean, I get your point. I mean, but he can't do much. He just can't do much, and that's the issue, really.
Right. Well, there's only so much you can do with one ship, which hasn't really got a very good working engine. That you're supposed to be helping with the Straits of Hormuz blockade with, he hasn't exactly got much skin in the game. But David, thank you very much indeed. David Maddox there from the newspaper talking about the future for Keir Starmer. They can't be bright, can it? I mean, he should just get out of the way, shouldn't he? Surely, to heavens. It's coming up to, 8 on the international clock, as well as on the local clock, of course, here in London. We'll be talking very shortly to our next guest, Elliot Hammer, from the Daily Sceptic. He's going to talk to us about what's looking like a bloodbath, not for just for Labour around the country, but particularly in London and in places where they have been, the only kind of go-to political party for decades, right? But it's all looking pretty bad for them. Sarah Pochin is going to be here as well from Reform. Also, Laura Perrins and Lewis Schaefer is going to give us his take on the King's visit to the United States of America. First, though, should we get some news with Edward Hughes?
Good morning. I'm Edward Hughes. It's Wednesday, the 29th of April. King Charles is over in Washington charming Congress and Trump with speeches about our unbreakable special relationship. Trump loved it so much, he name-dropped his mum's crush. Diplomacy at its most awkward. Back home, Sir Keir Starmer just dodged a sleaze probe over fast-tracking Peter, Prince of Darkness Mandelson, as US ambassador. Labour calls it a Tory stunt. Everyone else calls it Tuesday. Vetting? What vetting? Meanwhile, the NHS is still advertising hundreds of jobs while supposedly being abolished. High street chains are dropping like flies, and the ambassador's been caught on tape saying America's only real special relationship is with Israel. Perfect timing for the Royal Charm offensive. Please remember to like and subscribe. Laters, Tigers.
Right, I've just come out of the Old Bailey. I've never been here before. I've just been watching this case involving 3 Ukrainians who committed arson on Keir Starmer's properties, or former properties. It's the first day of the trial, and at the moment, all I can tell you is I got in there. The reporting restrictions are not that restrictive, so I can say that they've all pleaded not guilty, and I can also tell you that the trial is expected to last for 3 to 4 weeks, and I am planning to be here to tell you all that happened. So yeah, it's better than being at home looking after chickens, although I have to say I do miss my chickens, and that's where I'm going right now, on my way back home. So catch up with me later, yeah?
That's Crispin Flintoff there, who's a sort of citizen journalist who's gone down to the Old Bailey to cover the fire bumming trial, for want of a better word, phrase. I don't know what he's going on about his chickens for. I mean, that doesn't seem to be something we need to know about, That's like me saying, I'm sorry I've had to leave the children tied up at home while I come to work. You don't need that kind of detail. I'll give you a tip, Crispin. Also, they're not people who have committed arson. They're people who have been accused of committed arson, which is quite an important distinction because innocent until proven guilty in this country. But there are no reporting restrictions. There's an awful lot of tinfoil hat wearing types who are going, why is there a D notice on this? Well, there isn't. Why are there reporting restrictions on this case? There aren't. I mean, it may well be that over the course of time, we will get some very interesting revelations that come out. But the way that court reporting works in this country is that you go to the court, you report what is being said, and you can't report anything else. That's basically it. You can only report what comes out in the court as it unfolds, and so that is what court reporting is all about. And once the case ends, if the men are found guilty or innocent, then you can say an awful lot more. It's why we used to do things called background stories, so that you could publish it as soon as the court case was over. That's the way the system works. You may not like it, but that's the legal situation. But Crispin's doing a great job. Crispin Flintoff, we might try and get a hold of him over court. He's a farmer, is he? Well, that would explain why he's got chickens, I suppose. Yeah. But we'll maybe catch up with Crispin, and we will keep an eye on this particular court case because I know an awful lot of people are very interested in it, not least Keir Starmer, who probably wants to know why these people decided to do what it was that they were accused of doing. But anyway, we'll come back to that. Right now, we're going to speak to Elliot Hammer, who is with the Daily Sceptic. Elliot, very good morning to you.
Hi, Mike. Hi.
Welcome to the Mike Graham Show. Nice to see you. You're here to talk about, it says here, you've written a piece about Haringey, which is one of the boroughs in London which Labour have run for 54 years.
That's right.
They're likely now to no longer be in charge of it as part of the big sweep of anti-Labour sentiment, which is going to get rid of them. I suppose the question is, what does it mean for the people? I mean, is it the Greens that are going to unseat them here in London? Is it Reform? How's it all going to work?
So just to set the scene, this is David Lammy territory, Catherine West territory. Yeah. Previously, the Soviet Socialist Republic of Haringey. Yeah. As you say, it's been Labour for 54 years. They've ruled the roost. But things are changing, and things are changing big because Zach Polanski's Greens are marching in like a horde, like a column. Right. And what people are saying, people in the know, they're saying that the Greens are going to get so many wards in Haringey that the Labour administration will be a minority administration, and they'll need the Greens to back them up. Who knows what chaos will ensue when the Greens, if they get in. And if you look at their manifesto, maybe we'll come into it in a minute, it's bonkers.
Yeah, well, it really is. I mean, I saw a piece yesterday in which it suggested that the Greens kind of peak, if you like, just before the Gorton and Denton by-election up in Manchester happened, is starting to kind of wane to an extent as more and more people actually discover that what they want is actually bonkers. But the trouble is, there's a lot of bonkers people in London who will probably think bonkers is great, right?
There's a lot of fabulous people, great people in London. As you say, maybe there's other people who think that the Greens' agenda is a good thing. I saw that report. I saw it on Twitter, I think. The Greens, maybe they're coming away, but it looks like the Greens are going to get a lot of wards in Haringey. Also, they might even win in Hackney, which is the neighbouring borough. And so what I'm worried about, I'm a Conservative, I'm standing in Fry and Barnet ward, which is in Haringey and Barnet. Right. We're worried that there's going to be this kind of ping pong of bonkers, progressive socialism, luxury automated communism, bring in, and just to look at some of their policies. One of their policies is that they're going to bring in consumption rooms. Right. Consumption rooms in Haringey. What are they consuming? Drugs.
Drugs, right.
They're going to make it so that there's drugs that you can just take. The council are going to pay for it.
Right. So are they going to supply the drugs as well, or just the space?
I don't think they're going to supply them. Right. But they're talking about safer consumption rooms. Now, there is no consumption rooms in Haringey, so what does safer mean?
They tried that in Glasgow, didn't they, a while ago? I don't know if they still are doing it, but it didn't work terribly well, it seems to me.
Well, what does it show to people who you know, what are they going to have? Beautiful sofas in there, beautiful, carpets, luxury consumption rooms to go with their luxury automated communism. And what are the kids going to think? Yeah. They're going to think, oh, well, if I take drugs and Haringey Council are paying for it, why don't I do that? Yeah. There's going to be zombies, drugs everywhere in Haringey. And that's what we're really worried about.
Yeah, of course. And of course, the difficulty with local elections is always the fact that it's a low turnout, generally speaking. And the good thing for people like the Greens is that if they can galvanise and sort of, interest enough people to go out and vote, they could do well just because they're actually going out and voting, which is something that a lot of people at local elections don't do. Is there a sense that you're going to get more votes or more people out because of the way that the country is running at the moment, that more people are interested in voting for local elections, or do you think it's still going to be a pretty low turnout?
My fear is that people might think, well, if I vote Green, that's a thump to Starmer. You know, that's showing Labour that, you know, they're dreadful in the nationals, and therefore let's give them a thumping in the locals. But what are they bringing in? They really need to look at that Green manifesto in Haringey. Yeah. Have a look at it. Another thing, just out of interest, what they want to do is take some of the revenue from Tottenham. Tottenham's the local football club. They're going to create a Tottenham community fund. Oh, yeah. So instead of paying for strikers for Tottenham, which I think they need at the moment.
They do need one or two.
You're going to be paying for luxury consumption rooms for drugs.
Yeah. Well, this is the other problem with the Greens, is that they also want to limit the ability for people who are reasonably wealthy, or what they regard as wealthy, from making any money. Yeah. They don't like landlords. They want to, put a cap on landlords, although Rachel Rees is talking about doing that as well, because of the Greens, effectively, right? They also don't like business. They don't like anybody making money. They don't like anybody having money. I presume, and this is a worry, I think, for a lot of Londoners, and it may be for other parts of the country as well, if they do get into positions of power, they will impose all manner, I would imagine, of low traffic neighbourhoods, even worse than we have already. Speed limits, even worse than we have already. Traffic calming. All of the sort of anti-car stuff that Sadiq Khan does, only multiplied by 100.
Worse. Look at the manifesto. They're saying that 20 is plenty, right? What happens if they say 10's too much?
Yeah, well,
they have someone waving a flag in front of the car. Yeah. You want to drive through Haringey.
I mean, I remember seeing this not that long ago, actually, in East London. There was some roadworks going on, and they actually had a 10-mile-an-hour speed limit going past the roadworks.
Why not?
I mean, I was moaning yesterday because in a place not far from where I live in Jamaica Road, Bermondsey, they closed off Jamaica Road so that 2 vans from Thames Water could park there, even though they weren't actually fixing anything in the road. They were fixing something on the pavement. But because of this ridiculous idea that, we can't go anywhere near the road where cars might be driving past, they just shut the road. Yeah. And so everybody was put on diversion. The whole of the southeast of London was gridlocked as a result. And they were there for about 6 or 7 hours all afternoon.
You're entirely right. In that manifesto, as I keep saying, they specifically say that if they get in power in Haringey, they want to put pressure on the national government to introduce a wealth tax. Yeah. And people in Haringey, a lot of people in Haringey are quite wealthy. Yeah. And rightly so.
And they'll probably base it on the cost of the housing, which is obviously, being in London, very expensive. So if you've got a house that's worth £1 million in London, I know it might sound ridiculous to people living in other parts of the country. It doesn't make you rich. It just means you've got a property that has accrued an awful lot of money over time since it was bought maybe 25, 30 years ago.
That's right. You might not have a lot of disposable income. Read that Green Party manifesto. Absolutely bonkers. I'm very worried about the drug situation, that they really want to bring this in. They're talking about decriminalising drugs. It sets a wrong precedent. It kind of encourages people to take drugs. I'm sorry, but that's...
And they're very pro-immigration as well, aren't they? They don't believe in having any borders. In fact, the only border they believe in having is the one around Palestine, right? That's the one that they think should be there.
But
they don't believe in stopping migrants from coming here, but either legally or illegally.
What they want to do is make Haringey a sanctuary borough. Yeah. And what that means, and they specifically say in the manifesto, they want to make sure that all refugees come, they can access as much as legally possible, they say, benefits, NHS healthcare, all the rest of it. They want luxury situations for asylum seekers, refugees. Some of them, of course, are perfectly legal, but some, a lot of people get economic migrants, don't we? We know about that.
And what do we know about the funding of the Green Party? Because they've had this sort of incredible rise to popularity over the course of the last 12 months, say, since Zach Polanski became their leader, and he's, of course, an Assembly member of the London Assembly. Where's their money coming from?
Well, it's been like a rocket, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Somebody ought to ask that question.
I think we should stop.
Is it simply people making donations? Is it, what we sometimes have seen in the past when it comes to people like Greta Thunberg and sort of climate maniacs who get money from some of these nutters in America who are kind of, incredibly left-wing communist types, but have got access to millions and millions and millions of dollars, and who send it and funnel it to these kind of campaigning groups on the left.
You've got to remember, a lot of people still think the Greens are cuddly, they're all about the environment, ecology, environment, all that kind of stuff, but they're not. They've changed. They've completely changed.
Yeah. Well, they hardly ever talk about the actual environment, do they? And when you see what happened in Scotland, one of the reasons that Nicola Sturgeon ended up losing the plot and losing her First Minister's job was because she had to get into bed with the Greens in a coalition. And there was a guy called Patrick Harvey, who was the one that introduced all the sort of gender stuff that got her into so much trouble, putting men into women's prisons if they identified as women and all of that. And that was all down to their coalition with the Greens. And if they'd never had to do that, she'd probably still be fine.
And we're worried about the education. What are they going to teach the kids once they have control of the council? This gender nonsense that they want. They love the gender nonsense, completely love it. And they were also talking about the triggers of terrorism.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean?
Right.
We want to scrutinise Greens.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem.
Well, they're quite anti-Semitic as well. I mean, is there any issue in London with their kind of the what you might call the radical wing, if you like, of the Greens, which is, of course, the sort of Gaza-inspired, Muslim fundamentalist part of the Green Party? Is that a thing in London or not really?
Haringey, a lot of the Jewish community lived there. At a recent hustings, one Jewish member of the community she expressed very terrified about the Greens getting in, and that tells you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and what about reform in London? Obviously, that's I presume a concern for Conservatives in London as well. How are you expecting them to do?
Not so much. East of England, north, south, reform do very well. London, not so much for reform. People know that the Tories are the best bet for a proper, sensible council. And I would urge people to vote Conservative in Haringey. And we've got a full slate of candidates, so vote Conservative up and down the list.
Okay. So you couldn't do that on most shows, but you can do it here because we're not governed by Ofcom regulations. If you were trying to get yourself on any major, what you might call mainstream channel, they would go, no, we can't do that because then we have to put every other councillor on from your ward, which is kind of mad. Those rules are really archaic, aren't they? I mean, they should do away with them, really.
I think they should be changed, but I'm not in charge.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, thank you very much indeed. That's Elliot Hammer there talking on behalf of the Conservative Party for Haringey. I know it might sound a bit localised to you, but the Greens are a real problem. Uncle Joe on the Snapchats, not the Snapchats, the Super Chat says, "Who's funding the Green Party? Sugar-free daddies." Yeah, very good. I see what you did there. We're going to do a little meltdown, I think, coming up just before we talk to our next guest. And of course, Sarah Pochin will be talking to us, Laura Perrins as well. Lewis Schaefer will be doing his take on the King's visit to America. Also, we haven't even mentioned the poll, have we? And the poll is out there. Who is the biggest male crush? And I've got a surprising comment for you after this, Pooch. King Charles comes in at 9%. George Clooney, 8%. Brad Pitt, 18%. And Keir's Ukrainian models coming in at 65%. Margaret actually sent in a message to the chat on YouTube and said, "Why has Mike not been included? Why have I not been included?"
Because she hasn't seen me yet.
Oh, well, nobody's ever going to see you. Pooch is not allowed to be seen because he's so devastatingly handsome that people wouldn't be able to handle it. But anyway, should we do a little meltdown?
Yeah,
let's do it. So, here we are, day 1063 or something of the Keir Starmer Self-Defence League, right? Keir Starmer desperately trying to cling on to power no matter what. And I've got quite a lot to say about it today, and I know that many of you will be sitting there thinking, do you know what? We just don't want to hear any more about it. We don't want to hear any more about him. And if you fall into that trap, you will be doing precisely what he wants. Because what Keir Starmer is all about is literally bumming you into submission, right? Making you feel as though, actually, I can't be bothered. I'm just going to walk away. I'm just going to not take any notice anymore, and I'm just going to get on with my life. That's his plan. That's his strategy, right? He's got so many boring people around him that they think if they can keep going out onto the stump, going onto television shows, telling everybody why this is not an important deal, that everyone will just lose interest. I mean, take Bridget Phillipson, right? She was out and about yesterday morning telling everyone why Keir Starmer had done nothing wrong and that he's nothing like Boris Johnson. Have a look at this. Bridget Phillipson, 0. You might be good looking, mate, but you're not much good at your job. Where's it gone? Here we are.
I mean, you say it's a political stunt. It was the process that Keir Starmer chose to use against Boris Johnson a few years ago. Why was that not a stunt?
Look, let's just remind ourselves what Boris Johnson did. So there was a police investigation. Boris Johnson was fined because when everyone else during COVID was staying at home, was following the rules, they were having parties in Downing Street. That's why that process followed. And there is a world of difference between the actions of Boris Johnson and what he did in that time, which we all remember really well, when people were losing loved ones, couldn't go to funerals, and they were having parties in Downing Street, wheeling in suitcases full of booze. That's one thing. And then we've got something totally different today, a political stunt from the Conservatives. There is just light and shade.
A political stunt from the Conservatives. This is the level of intellectual debate that we now find ourselves having to suffer, right? Keir Starmer basically hasn't got a clue. All he knows is that he needs to cling on to his job because he's got nothing better to do. He doesn't have much going on at home. In fact, he wanders around inside Downing Street at night on his own. That's what we're told. We're told that Mrs. Starmer is nowhere to be seen. We're still checking that out. But he's now got so desperate that he wants to bring Angela Rayner back. I mean, this is a guy who, if he was told to run naked down Whitehall, he would do it tomorrow. If he was told to dig up Harold Wilson and bring his corpse back into number 10, he'd do that. If he was told, you know, the best thing you can do now is to get yourself an invisibility cloak and go down to a sauna in Vauxhall and hang around with some gay people, and maybe that would help you to stay in power, he would do that as well. I don't know if he'd know how to get there, but you never know. The point is this: Starmer is a disgrace. He is undemocratic. He was elected by a tiny minority of people in this country, and he has failed miserably to carry out even the things that he said he would do. He said that he was going to take money away from pensioners, right? He was going to make sure that they couldn't heat their homes. He said that they had too much money. He was going to stop giving them the winter fuel allowance. And then he reversed it. And he gave it back to them. He said that he was going to smash the gangs. He may have smashed a few things since he's been in Downing Street, but he hasn't smashed the gangs. He sacked more people from his cabinet than he's appointed. And now he wants to bring Angela Rayner back, the former Deputy Prime Minister, the former Housing Secretary, who still owes a bunch of money to the HMRC Brigade, the tax man. She still hasn't settled that. Who else is he going to bring back? Right? Jeremy Corbyn, who he once said was his friend, who apparently now isn't his friend. Who else is he going to turn up with on the steps of Downing Street? Is he going to say, Lord Mandelson, now there's a good guy, why don't we bring him back? You know, they're all running away at 100 miles an hour from what happened. Everybody knows the truth. Keir Starmer is a busted flush. Now, all of his Labour MP supporters are complicit in the cover-up that we all know has happened. We all know as well that it's inevitable that he leaves. So he should just go, shouldn't he? And I know that I've said it before, and I know that I've predicted it before, and I still know that I will be right in the end, because he will go. And I think he won't go before now, perhaps, the elections in May. But that's only a week away. I just can't see him surviving. And it's bad for the country, it's bad for his party, it's bad for him. He just needs to disappear, and he will go, when he does go, with perhaps the worst fanfare of any Prime Minister ever. He makes every other Prime Minister look brilliant because he's that bad. He's completely and utterly useless. And guess what? We're all the recipients of the suffering. 2.2 million extra migrants are going to be coming here in the next 8 years. That is shameful. Nobody wants them. We certainly don't want them. And you should go out and vote on Thursday, the 7th of May, accordingly. Get rid of this complete and utter shyster and do it now. A little bit of news before we speak to Sarah Pochin from Edward Hughes, who is looking all right today.
Good morning. I'm Edward Hughes. It's It's Wednesday, the 29th of April. King Charles is over in Washington charming Congress and Trump with speeches about our unbreakable special relationship. Trump loved it so much, he name-dropped his mum's crush. Diplomacy at its most awkward. Back home, Sir Keir Starmer just dodged a sleaze probe over fast-tracking Peter, Prince of Darkness Mandelson, as US ambassador. Labour calls it a Tory stunt. Everyone else calls it Tuesday. Vetting? What vetting? Meanwhile, the NHS is still advertising hundreds of jobs while supposedly being abolished. High street chains are dropping like flies, and the ambassador's been caught on tape saying America's only real special relationship is with Israel. Perfect timing for the Royal Charm offensive. Please remember to like and subscribe. Laters, Tigers.
Edward, thank you very much indeed. He seems a bit better in terms of his mood than he was yesterday. So maybe he's getting back to normal. We shall see. I don't mind his haircut. I mean, I think it looks a bit rad, as we used to say.
He looks like Kelvin.
Kelvin McKenzie. Yeah, he'll be back on Friday, by the way, if anybody's wondering. Right now, though, let's talk to Sarah Pochin, who is, of course, Reform MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Sarah, very good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm not sure about my camera angle. Am I quite right there this morning?
I know you've got a very nice looking kitchen, but you need to move over a bit. Yeah, there you go. That's good.
Is that better?
That's better. That's much better, yeah. Excellent. Very good to see you.
Pooch didn't do his bit this morning and get me in the right position.
Well, Pooch has been a bit obsessed. He's been a bit obsessed with his own image today because we've got a poll out asking for who is the biggest crush out there, and I think can we flash it up? Yeah, is it King Charles? Is it George Clooney? Is it Brad Pitt? Or is it Keir's Ukrainian models who are obviously currently being investigated? And a couple of people have said, "Why is Mike not involved in that? Why have I not got to go?" And then he said he should be on it because he's now he's a bit distracted. I think this morning. That's the thing.
Okay, well, as long as I'm roughly in the right place for you.
Yeah, you are roughly in the right place, which is good. Unfortunately, though, we awake to the news that Keir Starmer is still the Prime Minister, which is rather disturbing. And I thought it was a pretty bad day for democracy yesterday, to be serious for a minute, where Keir Starmer has to kind of whip his entire party into voting for him to save his own skin, which is what the papers are saying this morning. It's pretty shameful behaviour, isn't it?
It was a shocking day to witness. I was in the chamber listening for a good 3 hours to the debate. I didn't stay for the entire, I think it was 5 hours before we voted, but I certainly listened to the first 3 or so. And it was very, very interesting to hear some of the backbench Labour MPs saying what we are saying. That is that, look, Keir, if you haven't lied, if you've got nothing to worry about, then why not refer yourself, which is what they were calling for, to the Privileges Committee? Because the fact that they whipped the Labour MPs, surely that says everything. That says he has got something to hide.
Well, of course he's got something to hide, because everybody knows that the one thing that you can't take for granted is anything that Keir Starmer says, because even when he's making policy, he reverses it. When he makes a statement, I mean, we played a clip yesterday of all of his kind of, lies, effectively, that he's told over the years. Like, for example, Jeremy Corbyn's a friend of mine. The next clip says, "Oh, well, we're never really friends, not in the way that people go around to each other's houses." And then he would say, gender, we don't believe in gender specifications. Oh, no, we do. Oh, we don't believe in a single market anymore. We've left the European Union. Oh, now we want to go back into it. I mean, it's just one thing after another. That he contradicts himself on.
Yeah, look, he clearly doesn't know his own mind, and that's what's so unsettling for a nation, I think, is to be led by somebody who doesn't have conviction about what they believe in, and flip-flops all over the place. People want to understand what their leader stands for. And in this Prime Minister, it changes on a daily, if not hourly basis. I mean, we can barely keep up with it ourselves, and, we live and breathe this stuff. But in terms of what he actually really stands for, it on several levels, I'm just coming to the end of my very first year on May the 1st. That was when I was elected. And so many things about Parliament have been amazing, but also so many disappointing. And listening and watching this Prime Minister has been one of the things that has been so disappointing for me. The quality of, I feel the quality of so many of the MPs in Parliament is just not quite what I expected. and watching the front bench, the cabinet, so disappointing in so many ways. And we could almost go through each and every one of them and look at the U-turns and the dire policies. I mean, after watching this show, if you like, this theatre for a year, and of course PMQs is an absolute theatre. There wasn't one today. Now apparently there is one today before Parliament is prorogued. But the PM doesn't answer any questions. In fact, not only that, he's quite rude. I've had 2 PMQs in a year, and he's so rude in the way he speaks and looks at you. It's I've been quite shocked. But coming back to the PM, look, he's raging a war almost on the true hardworking tax-paying people of this country. As you know, Reform calls them alarm clock Britain.
Yeah.
But in every which way you turn, he's almost like he's waging a war on us, penalising us with taxes, penalising business with minimum wage hikes and national insurance contributions, and all of that sort of thing. Utterly devoid of any feeling, I feel, when it comes to national security, of his responsibility to this country, to put us in a position where we can defend ourselves. It doesn't matter look at the energy. It doesn't matter what subject you choose. This government has let down the British people.
Yes, it has. And also, in the past sort of 10 days or so, it's been paralysed by this whole Mandelson affair. Nothing has been done. I mean, as you said, they spent 5 hours yesterday debating whether or not Keir Starmer should be referred to the Privileges Committee, which we all knew he wasn't going to be anyway. We spent, 3 hours a week ago Monday, where he was answering questions from people and telling flat-out lies about what he knew about the appointment of Peter Mandelson and when he knew it. We're now getting this Foreign Affairs Select Committee going on and on and on for hours on end. Yesterday we had Philip Barton, who I thought was a very good example of what's wrong with Britain, because here is a sort of civil servant Mandarin who can't seem to answer a straight question. I mean, he didn't do Starmer any favours, but when you ask somebody a question and they say, well, there's really 2 questions there, I think I'll answer 2 questions. You go, well, no, just answer one bloody question and do what you're told. But even Emily Thornberry voted to save Keir Starmer's arse yesterday. And you think, well, what's the point of it all? Is there anybody talking about the cost of living? Is there any likelihood that we're going to be putting prices of petrol down at the pumps? Are we going to lower fuel duty? Are we going to take VAT off? Are we going to try and make people's lives easier? And every time they trot out a parliamentarian or a member of the cabinet, they tell us that, we're working to make everybody's lives better and we're working to make the cost of living go down. It's not happening.
Well, what concerns me is that we get to a point where lying, or at least not being quite honest about the truth, starts to become acceptable in British politics. And as I say, what I've witnessed in Parliament has been really, really substandard from what I thought it would be like. We should never get to the point where our standards are dropping. People in public life elected to represent, the voters of this country, the citizens of this country, should never get to the point where it's acceptable to play, fast and loose with the truth. And look, another thing that's happened this week that has been so personally upsetting for me is this whole issue with the Northern Ireland veterans. Once again, this bill has been what's called carried over into the next Parliament. And I made the point that every MP that voted for that to happen, in other words, this Labour government's Troubles Bill, where it wants it's almost, it can barely hide its desire to prosecute some of our brave veterans. And yet this bill has been carried over. Every MP that voted for that, every Labour MP that voted for that should be ashamed of themselves and quite frankly does not deserve the protection of our armed forces in this country. That's happened this week as well. And because of all the Mandelson nonsense, it's almost gone a bit quietly under the radar. And that's what the government does, of course, isn't it? It pushes things through when there's other news stories to hide it. But this Northern Ireland bill is much more. The consequences are huge for the future, because young people now will not join our armed forces for fear of prosecution for actions they took in the line of duty. That's what this Troubles bill is. That's the message it's giving out to young men and women. You know, why would you join the army when you could be prosecuted for just doing your job? And the other fact is, of course, Mike, is that we've had more fighting age young men arrive in this country illegally on boats since Keir Starmer was in charge than we currently now have military capability, boots on the ground. We've got more illegals arrived in the last 18 months than we have a fighting force. That is a huge imbalance in this situation. That is a situation of national security emergency, in my view.
Exactly right. And a piece in The Sun this morning, page 17, says there's going to be a surge in migrants coming to this country in the next 8 years. This is a figure from the National Office of Statistics, 2.2 million extra migrants in the next 8 years. And actually it's worse than that, because that's a net figure, because they're saying 5 million people will emigrate long-term from the UK over the course of that same period, who are more than likely to be British people, I guess, moving to parts abroad because they want to move and they can. 7.2 million people will immigrate long-term to the UK between 2024 and 2034, which means that our population will balloon, if you like, by what they say is a net figure of 2.2 million. But it probably would be a lot more than that. And there's nothing to suggest that this government is going to do anything about it.
Watched the London Marathon because my son's girlfriend was running in it, and I actually went and watched it in Tower Hamlets, because there you can see them run around twice. Basically, they pass you twice. But looking around on the morning of the marathon, I could have been in a LGBTQ plus whatever it is, rally. There was not a Union Jack in sight. Every single flag was the rainbow plus flag now. Because originally it was the sort of just the gay rights flag, wasn't it? But now it seems to stand for just about every possible option of gender and sexual orientation that you choose to decide you are. The streets were flooded with all of that, and Palestinian flags everywhere. So
I was going to say, I suppose
on the lampposts, the council had allowed, as somebody put up, all down the streets Palestinian flags. I felt like I was in a parallel universe. How something like the London Marathon could be turned into, again, some kind of political event, political messaging. And the irony, do you know what the irony of all of those Palestinian flags was in Tower Hamlets on the day of the London Marathon? Is there were very, very few Muslim runners in the London Marathon. And yet, what is this country talking about? This is a traditional event that we should celebrate. It's the biggest marathon, one would argue, in the world. And here we are promoting things that are just not relatable to the British people anymore.
No, well, that's the problem with London, and that's the problem with Birmingham. I mean, I'm reading this morning in the Mail, Reform is on course to make major gains across the West Midlands in next week's local elections. I mean, the biggest probably a barrier to reform in the Midlands is not the Labour Party or the Tories, it's probably the Greens, and they're kind of, they're slightly off to the side. Gaza supporting, Muslim fundamentalist types who are all kind of signing up to the Green vote.
Well, the Greens are a platform for Islam extremism. And I tell you, Mike, as soon as they have enough, people, God help us, but members of parliament or local representation at council level, then they will dump the Greens. They are using the Greens as a platform. And the Greens are, they're nuts. We know they're nuts. They're lunatics. We're probably not allowed to say that word anymore. But anyway, I just have. But the point is, the Green Party with their crazy ideas are simply a platform for Muslim extremism, and they will get dumped when the Muslims have enough public elected officials. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a huge threat, and people just don't accept it. I have family members that I have arguments with about this. They cannot see what the Green Party is all about. You have this new lady come in, Hannah Spencer, who has
fake
claimed
plumber, as I call her.
What do you call her?
I call her the fake plumber.
Yeah, but she apparently has complained about the, these MPs are always smelling of alcohol and all the rest of it. Oh, so it's fine to be injecting your veins with heroin, is it, Hannah Spencer? But it's not okay to have a glass of wine. So this is the sort of like crazy policies that that people don't seem to really understand that the Greens now stand for. They don't talk about tree hugging anymore.
No.
You know, I mean, do you remember those sweet old days
No, now
when
it's
the
now it's
Greens
sort
used
of
to...
now it's hug an Islamist, isn't it?
Well, that's so true. We need to find a more catchy phrase for that, but that's exactly what it's all about. Hug a Muslim? I don't know.
Yeah, right, exactly right. Well, funnily enough, I was talking to a guy who's running in London, in Haringey, and saying that the Greens are probably going to do very, very well in certain parts of London, not least because of the number of Muslims who are going to vote for the Green Party. And then when they get in, they're going to do some terrible things because they don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in wealth. They're going to put wealth taxes on people. They're going to start probably trying to challenge people who live in those boroughs with mansion taxes or something like that, or they'll try and reduce the ability for people to drive their cars. They'll do all manner of really, really quite radical things. Make drugs. Apparently, one of the things they've been discussing is making sort of drug use rooms available so that people can go into a sort of safe space and take drugs in the middle of London. All of these kinds of things, which I think that people realise is going to happen.
It's really frightening and people don't understand it, but even more concerning than that are things like the fact that they, as I say, they are a platform for some very extremist views, and gay rights, gay people should be concerned because they're a platform for Islam extremism who, let's face it, do not accept a gay man or a lesbian woman. They are a platform for the suppression of women. So we should be, again, as I mentioned earlier, concerned about women's rights. So this Green Party is utterly dangerous. They are simply a vehicle for Islam extremism. And yes, they also have their own crackpot policies, like let's legalize Class A drugs. I was a magistrate for 20 years, Mike. The work and the effort that goes in by the police forces around up and down the country to try and crack down on the drug problem that we have. I mean, young kids affected. In my constituency in Runcorn, there's the ketamine for the kids it's awful, and yet the Greens are saying that that's okay, that young people's minds can be literally poisoned, and that's legal. What kind of future do they think they want this country to look like?
Yeah, I know, it's absolutely shocking. Let me take you just back to what happened yesterday in the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Morgan McSweeney, who most of us have never really seen much before. He came across as a very weird guy, it seemed to me. I mean, I was expecting to see this kind of, rather impressive, slightly, romanticised Irish figure who was going to be like the gift of the gab and the Blarney and all the rest of it. And he was just this kind of odd-looking bloke. Here he is talking about how he didn't know or wouldn't say what sort of vetting he had to get his job. That's all right. Have you got it? We'll get it in a minute, I'm sure. Pooch's having a bad day. He's so obsessed with his own looks now. He's spending so much time looking in the mirror. He's screwing up the clips. Have you got it? Hang on, it's coming. And we didn't learn much from his appearance, really, did we? Because we were hopeful that we didn't think he would throw Keir Starmer under the bus or anything like that. But I thought he might be a little bit more kind of forthcoming about what he knew, and he wasn't really.
Look, at the end of the day, it's a bit like Cummings. No one had really ever heard of them until all of this sleaze comes into the public domain. And Morgan McSweeney, exactly the same. No one's ever really heard of him. Who is he? But the fact is that both him and people like Dominic Cummings, they've been around for years. They've made their life out of the political shenanigans and the dark arts that go on at the highest levels of these main parties, and you know what, they come into public eye, and what a disappointment. I think we all think of them as some kind of Bond villains, and they're actually really quite boring.
Well, they're just dweebs, aren't they? They're just dweebs. So you wouldn't have, if you were at school with them, you wouldn't have spoken to them. You're just kind of like, that's a bit of a strange character. Any luck, Pooch?
100%.
We got it? Let's have a look.
Have we got it now?
Yeah.
What the
hell's going on?
Tell her about yesterday morning.
Yesterday morning. Oh, yeah, all right. I don't know what he's doing. Yesterday morning, Yesterday morning we started the show and we went, right, good morning. And it was an empty chair. I was not in, I mean, I was sitting here, but somehow they were filming something that had happened some moments before. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know, perhaps we're being hacked. So we're being hacked again.
Anybody. You said yourself, because you were appointed without DV and the National Security Advisor was appointed without DV, it wasn't unusual. Do you think that the number 10, when you were Chief of Staff, had a dismissive or an uninterested approach to security vetting because of your own experiences?
No. I think everybody in number 10, because of what you learn in that job, takes national security more seriously than any other issue.
When you were appointed after the election, what level of security clearance did you have?
I think it's common practice for ex-civil servants to not talk about the security clearances they had, and I'll continue that practice, because when you're in post, you're told you can't say what clearances you have. I had all the necessary clearances to do my job, and I saw whatever papers I was given, and that process is managed by civil servants.
Okay, so you had DV at the point that you were appointed as Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister?
I don't want to say what my security clearances were, but I had all the security clearances I needed to do my job, and I completed the forms and the processes and the interviews the same as anyone else.
I mean, this whole thing is about security clearances, developed vetting. We've had a long conversation about the process. I think if you had developed vetting at that point when you were Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, you would be able to tell us. And I'm surprised that you're not telling us.
Because what I understand from speaking to civil servants is that the practice is that they don't share what security clearances they had. I'll follow that practice, but only to say that I had all the necessary clearances to do my job, to read the papers I read, to attend the meetings.
I mean, it's like a different language, isn't it? What? Yeah.
It's so boring. It's so boring.
Right.
You know, and do the public even, do they care about the difference between DV, developed vetting, or vetting, or, do you know, that session yesterday will have cost, you know, thousands to sit these people down with these committees and all the rest of it. You know, all the public wants to know is, did Downing Street tell the Foreign Office to ignore the vetting or push through the vetting? Was that motivated by Keir Starmer wanting to get Mandelson into the post? I believe, yes, that is exactly what happened. You know, the Foreign Office were told to overlook the vetting procedure by Downing Street, just get a move on. We've heard the language that was used and to basically push through the vetting procedure. That's all the public need to know. They don't care about the semantics of developed vetting and this type of vetting. Look, they're all basically lying, in my opinion.
Of course
you
they
know,
are.
at the end of the day, they wanted Mandelson in post. I mean, goodness knows, you know, what actually relationship they all have, such that they were so desperate to please Mandelson and get him into the post. I mean, at the end of the day, let's not forget the Americans were very happy, and her name escapes me, but very happy with the competent woman that was doing the job before. You know, why did we even need to change?
Catherine Pierce? Was it Catherine Pierce?
Pierce, that's it. Pierce, yeah. You know, no surprise. Oh, hey ho, let's put a competent woman in charge. And the Americans were very happy with that. And look, as we've mentioned, the Americans, thank God, actually, for our king and queen that have been over there rescuing the situation and the relationship. Because, you know, as I've said earlier, we've talked about our current military capability. You know, without the Americans, we are utterly defenseless as a nation at the moment. And that is a situation that, let's not not forget 14 years of the Tory government has got us into. Utterly defenceless. We talk about putting the Navy in the Channel to turn the boats around. Well, do we have a Navy to put in the Channel? We can't even get a warship, can we? I think it's still in dock. It's not even made it to the Strait of Hormuz. The whole war with the oil war will be over by the time our ship gets there.
I know.
But the point is, all of this stuff going on in Westminster, there are such huge issues for this government to tackle, and they're not tackling them. And worse than that, they are almost, they're just descending into this world of sleaze and chaos and dark arts and dirty tricks. And we hear, don't we, that Angela Rayner, surprise, she voted in favour of not referring Keir Starmer to the Privileges Committee. Well, we wonder what's going on there. Tax affairs are about to be sorted. Labour are going to be decimated on May the 7th. And surprise, surprise, I expect Angela Rayner will be at that point making a bid for the leadership.
Yes, well, apparently Keir Starmer was going to invite her back into the government in order to sort of put off the idea that she might depose him in some way, shape or form. So he's going to probably have to get on with that and do it before Thursday. Otherwise, it's all going to go tits up, if you'll pardon the expression. But I mean, the other thing...
Only you could say that, Mike, and get away with it.
I can. But the other thing that's going on here is that it shows why the government is so useless at doing anything. Because you've got an entire tranche of these civil servants who apparently can't make a decision, who can't define anything, who can't explain anything, who are not allowed to tell anybody anything, not allowed to share anything, and you wonder why every single government department is in sort of paralysis, right? As you said, we haven't got a Navy. I mean, the best description of the Navy was by Matt, the cartoonist in the Telegraph a few weeks ago, when he had a sign on one of the ships that said, it's a replacement bus service today, because that's kind of what we've got. The whole nation is a replacement bus service because nothing works.
Yeah, nothing works. But also, the fact is that the number one priority for any government, whatever colour, is the protection of its citizens. And this government and the last government have utterly failed in the number one duty they have to the nation. They have failed in terms of securing our borders. They have failed in terms of our armed forces capability. We cannot currently now defend ourselves, I don't believe, from the threat within, let alone an international threat. What a desperate situation these two main parties have let us get into. And that is why the people will vote accordingly on May the 7th. And that is why at the next general election, they will vote these two main parties down. Because, we are currently in a situation which is indefensible, that any government has let us get to the position of weakness that we currently are, as I say, in terms of defending a threat within and on an international scale.
Absolutely right. Sarah, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. It's going to be a busy week coming up for you guys, I'm sure. Lots of campaigning, lots of canvassing and all of that sort of thing. But enjoy it, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. Take care.
Sarah, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Sarah Pochin there, the Reform MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Lots of people are asking me why Nigel Farage wasn't there yesterday to vote. Well, he put a tweet out earlier on, I think last night, in which he said he was out campaigning to get rid of Keir Starmer. And you might take a view that because he is campaigning in different parts of the country, that's why he wasn't there. I don't think it tells you anything about whether or not he's willing to vote Starmer out, because he knew, like most people did, like I did, that come the debate, even though it took 5 bleeding hours to get through, there was never any chance of Starmer losing the debate. If it was on a knife edge, that would be one thing, but it clearly was not on a knife edge. Now, coming up, our next guest, Laura Perrins, is going to be joining us. She is a barrister. She's also a journalist at Gript Media in Dublin. We'll talk to her about not only the state of play here in the UK with regard to specifically Lord Hermer and what he's up to, trying to prosecute and persecute, if you like, an awful lot of our armed services personnel. But also, we'll get a little view from her on the special relationship and Charles and how funny some of what he said yesterday in Washington, D.C. actually was. First, though, I guess we need some more news from Edward Hughes.
Good morning. I'm Edward Hughes. It's Wednesday, the 29th of April. King Charles is over in Washington charming Congress and Trump with speeches about our unbreakable special relationship. Trump loved it so much, he name-dropped his mum's crush. Diplomacy at its most awkward. Back home, Sir Keir Starmer just dodged a sleaze. probe over fast-tracking Peter, Prince of Darkness Mandelson as US ambassador. Labour calls it a Tory stunt. Everyone else calls it Tuesday. Vetting? What vetting? Meanwhile, the NHS is still advertising hundreds of jobs while supposedly being abolished. High street chains are dropping like flies, and the ambassador's been caught on tape saying America's only real special relationship is with Israel. Perfect timing for the Royal Charm offensive. Please remember to like and subscribe. Laters, Tigers.
Edward Hughes there with the news. He's had a bit of trouble domestically lately, but we're told that things might be on the mend. We're told that things might be on the up and up, and Mrs. Hughes apparently might be willing to take him back. We've had a note passed to us by her lawyers, but basically he has to get rid of his hair. He can't have a Mohican because you can't go out with somebody like that. It just looks ridiculous. But listen, you're not the only one concerned about it. Have we got any super chats to do, Pooch? We've done them all? Okay. Let's talk to Laura Perrins. She's a journalist at Grip Media, former barrister, works in Dublin and London. Laura, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to see you. Shall we kick off with Charles? Because I think, I've been really, really irritated by an awful lot of the lefties in this country who were telling everyone that, it's going to be embarrassing. Charles is going to go to America and Trump's going to do something terrible and it's all going to be extremely difficult and awkward. And what we saw yesterday, I thought was pretty much a masterclass from Charles in diplomacy and in a bit of humour. The things that he said, he got everybody laughing. Trump was on his best behaviour. I thought it all went terribly well, didn't you?
Yes, I thought it went very well. I think the speechwriters, both for Trump and the King, did incredibly well. I mean, there were quite a good few laughs in there. I think my favourite was when the King said 250 years ago, or as we say in Britain, just the other day. It's kind of a dig at how old Britain is compared to the United States, and obviously the issue about speaking. Yes, we might be speaking German if it wasn't for the British, but you'd all be speaking French if it wasn't for us.
Right.
So there were some great gags in there, but there were also some really interesting and important points diplomatically that he made, clearly in terms of the United States stepping up to defend Ukraine. And also Trump, whoever wrote his speech, did an excellent job in explaining just the concept of liberty and how it didn't appear in 1776, but actually those who fought in the revolution thought of themselves as extending the gift of liberty that Britain had given to them.
Yes.
It wasn't a classic revolution in that sense. I think it was a masterclass in diplomacy. He as the speechwriters have done very well, and he got the tone right, I think.
Yes, I think so. But it was also a good reminder as well, because we have had over the course of the last sort of few weeks and months, I suppose, this kind of chipping away at the special relationship, as it's called. And I'm not a fan of that particular phrase, but, we've seen Keir Starmer and others in the Labour government kind of trying to distance themselves from Donald Trump as if he's some kind of, maverick character who is doing terrible damage to the world. He's invaded Iran and he shouldn't have done it, and we didn't join in and all of that, and we must have closer ties with Europe. And I think most people in this country, aside from the crazed lefties, would rather have a closer relationship with America than they would with Brussels, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, clearly Britain's relationship with the United States is still very, very important, but that doesn't mean supporting Trump in absolutely everything he does,
Right.
and if he's going to risk the world economy for that. I think if you're in the special relationship, it means that you're able to say, we don't think this is a very good idea. It is actually the anniversary of that phrase by Churchill, as well as the 250th anniversary. And look, it's had its ups and downs, as the King himself said, but it's incredibly important for Britain. I think obviously it's important for Europe as well. Trump was right in saying that the Europeans hadn't spent enough on defence, and that they were freeloading off the Americans. On that, I agreed with him, but it doesn't mean that everything he says should be supported.
Yes. No, I get that. But I mean, that's a sensible position to have, isn't it? Whereas what we do have instead of that is this kind of slight deranged attitude that, everything he does is wrong and everything he says is inconsidered or ill-considered, and everything that he wants to do is probably a bad idea, and we're much better off, cozying up to what is effectively a busted flush of a European Parliament and a European sort of union.
Yeah, well, I think the art of diplomacy is saying that you don't have to choose. Militarily, the United States clearly still rule, and Europe's defence still depends on the United States, partly because they have run down their defence so badly. I mean, including Britain, as your last guest, explained in terms of just how bad the Navy has been run down. But clearly Britain is obviously geographically very close, right beside Ireland, geographically very close to Europe. So maintaining relations and with them is key as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's play a couple of clips, if we may. This is Charles talking about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life at the weekend.
Of the incident not far from this great building that sought to harm the leadership of your nation and to foment wider fear and discord. Let me say with unshakable resolve, such acts of violence will never succeed. Whatever our differences, whatever disagreements we may have, we stand united in our commitment to uphold democracy, to protect all our people from harm, and to salute the courage of those who daily risk their lives in the service of our countries. Standing here today, it is hard not to feel the weight of history on my shoulder.
Now, there's an old Tony Blairism. You might remember that one from the Good Friday Agreement. Do you remember Tony Blair, one of his great moments when he came out and said, this is not a time for cliches, but I feel the weight of history on my shoulder. And everyone went, oh, for God's sake, another Alistair Campbell moment. But I mean, he actually looks quite well. He looks great. I think he's done Keir Starmer a massive favour by kind of bringing it all back from the brink, if you like, because Starmer clearly has not pleased Donald Trump. Whether you're a fan of his or not, it doesn't really matter. But he has not handled Trump well, in my view.
No, well, I mean, I think at first people were impressed with the way Starmer held it, if you're to be very objective about it. But clearly relations have deteriorated between the two. But look, I think the royal family and the King Charles, people all over the world, I think, still admire them. And obviously I'm speaking from Dublin, and I can get into a lot of trouble in terms of my admiration for the royal family. But the royal family and the king are unique, especially in 2026, because, he didn't choose this role. It's very unusual. You and I, Mike, we can do whatever we want, right? We can give up our jobs tomorrow in such an individualistic society that the West is, where adult desires dominate. Do whatever you want. This is a man who, from birth, this was his role, and he didn't have any choice over it. And right. I think people deep down really, admire that. And, as a conservative, I just like old things as a rule. You have to explain to me why we should not have something that's been around for ages and ages. I'm not someone who's, whereas other people think old things are bad things. No, this institution has stood the test of time, for a reason. Yeah. You mightn't be able to explain it why, but I think the more individualistic people come and more selfish things people come, the more materialistic the world becomes. Actually, something like the monarchy that still has a mystique, despite the problems that they clearly have, will actually get more and more attractive.
And it's interesting that you say that, because as a conservative, I suppose you might be expected to like older things. But one of the problems, I think, with this government, the Labour government, is that there's an awful lot of people in it who really don't like older things, and they'd actually quite like to strip it all away and start again. They're not that keen on the royal family. They're not that keen on the British Empire and the things that we did in the past. They're not very keen on sort of, international borders. They're rather keen, which brings us on to Lord Hermer, who I know you've been tweeting about. These human rights lawyers who they were described to me actually by a woman called Rebecca Butler. I don't know if you know her, but she comes on my show from time to time. She's also a barrister. And she said a lot of these human rights lawyers are are just literally kind of immigration panelists. You know, they make out that they're these great human brains and that they've done all these terribly wonderful things, but actually all they are is rather low-grade lawyers who are not particularly good.
Well, I mean, that is I think it's a mistake to claim that they're not good. Actually, a lot of them are incredibly competent. The issue is, how have they decided to use that ability? You know, what are they, you know, what side are they on, so to speak? It is true that a lot of them certainly do work in immigration work, and I think there's a slight arrogance to that. But I mean, what the King said, if he wants to get onto Hermer, you know, he did speak there in that last clip about people who daily risk our lives in the service for our country.
Yeah.
And again, that is sort of a conservative concept. And we know what Lord Hermer, at least from the emails released by the Telegraph, thought about British soldiers who risked their lives in the service of their country. And the question and the answer to that was not much. And this person, you know, he's your Attorney General now. He literally advises the government. He advises Keir Starmer in terms of what laws would survive, say, judicial review and not. And we know from the email that he said in relation to a solicitor who his argument was that he was supporting her because she had missed a key document in a massive case that we know essentially collapsed and with fabricated allegations against British soldiers. So he says to her, don't feel too bad. But then he goes on to say, your hard work, dedication and ability are outstanding and have made a real difference to people's lives. That is not something that Forbes, Neil Graham or his clients can ever say. Well, Sir Neil Graham is now a High Court judge. He was lead counsel for the British troops at the public inquiry, and his clients were the soldiers falsely accused by the Iraqis.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I've objected to and have written about is the moral superiority that a lot of these lawyers feel over and above what, you know, the natives feel. And clearly he feels he and the lawyers who are pursuing British soldiers are... It's not just a factual issue. It's that we are morally superior. What we are doing is better than what this ordinary soldier who has put his life on the line in Iraq.
Yeah.
Again, no questions asked, right? He's ordered to do that. But, you know, what she was doing, this particular solicitor, was far better than what they were doing. Like, I just couldn't imagine having that level of arrogance, to be honest. It's the lack of humility that I find quite frightening.
But it's a kind of snobbishness as well, isn't it? It's a sort of intellectual snobbishness where they look at people who are soldiers and they go, well, you know, you're really a bit of a grunt and you're sort of, you know, not terribly well educated. You didn't go to Oxford. You know, you haven't got a bar qualification. You haven't got a law degree. You're basically just, you know, not worth anything on my shoe. And you're quite right. I mean, a bad enough indictment of Hermer is that he doesn't think much of British soldiers. You know, I mean, that sort of says it all, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, certainly from that email, that's what it seems to be. And I think in a previous email when he was writing the when he was looking at the case at first, you know, again there was an email saying, oh well, now the statements from the Iraqis, which we know were then subsequently found to be false. This is why I became a lawyer. So again, it's the crusade that he's after. So don't bother me with the facts, which is why he talked previously about, well, you know, we need wriggle room if this turns out to be true. So this is a lawyer who's saying, don't bother me, don't burden me with the facts. It's the narrative, as we might say as journalists, that counts. It's the crusade that counts. Yeah. And look, he is a very accomplished lawyer. He was a lawyer for 30 years. It's certainly a mistake to think that they aren't competent. No. They're incredibly smart. The question then is, what are you doing with that? Yeah. And sometimes lawyers like to hide behind the cab rank rule. But if I can, Mike, the cab rank rule is actually there to protect, you know, ordinary people so that lawyers can't pick and choose their clients. But what the cab rank rule cannot be used for is when politicians or lawyers later become politicians. And then they say, no, we had to take that case. That isn't the case for cases at that level. They chose those cases. Yeah. Okay. And in
Starmer's case, particularly when he was working at Matrix Chambers, you know, they chose those cases all the time. It wasn't just that they chose one case and everyone went, oh, you didn't have to do that. They always chose those cases.
Yeah, well, Starmer's at Doughty Street, and those chambers are known for taking these kind of cases. Look, it would be sort of like, again, hiding behind. It would be like, say, if somebody, or I was at the criminal bar for a short time, but say I was a criminal defence barrister, and for 15 years all I did was defend people who accused of, rape and sexual offences. That's literally what I decided to dedicate my career for 15 years. And then after that 15 years, I say, actually, I'm going to run as an MP on a feminist background. I'm really, I'm really against violence for women and girls. Voters will be entitled to say, no, because you've just spent the last 15 years of your life defending all of those accused of rape and sexual offences, some of which will be innocent and some of which will be guilty. So I think you're entitled to judge people on the work they have done. You might no doubt are judged all the time on the work you do, right?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely right. And, I don't shrink from that, and neither should anybody else. And, Starmer, for example, says and gets people to say about him all the time. And I think was it Lucy Powell that was out defending him the other week, saying nobody has done more for women and girls and their safety than Keir Starmer. And everybody kind of went, well, hang on a minute. One of the things he's not doing is stopping men coming into this country illegally, many of whom are later found to be sexually assaulting or raping or killing women in this country. So effectively, he may have done things in the past, but what he's not doing is safeguarding women and girls right now in Britain.
Well, yeah, that is certainly an argument, and the other argument is, he dragged his heels to order the inquiry into the grooming gangs.
Yeah, of course.
Right? He wasn't falling over himself to order that inquiry. He eventually had to order it, and we're still waiting on that. That seems to be tied up in terms of reference. I think they've finally gotten a chair, but I haven't heard anything since. There were objections from the victims previously. So people can say what they want, but it's what their actions are, that you have to judge them on.
Yeah, well, my father used to say, don't judge people by what they say they're going to do, just judge them by where they spend their time. And he doesn't spend his time doing very much of any of that. And also, just going back to Lord Herman, a piece of the Telegraph today, General David Petraeus, who commanded coalition forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, the American military man general, basically says that Lord Herman is undermining the British military with this legal crusade against troops. And he said he must stop this lawfare against them, which is he's a pretty important guy in the military to say that.
Yeah, well, this is the point, is that it has a chilling effect, all of these cases, and I think himself and Starmer were involved in a case that the legal argument is whether or not the European Convention of Human Rights would apply to soldiers acting abroad. Look, obviously soldiers must act within the law, and there are plenty of rules and military law that establish that. Nobody is saying that soldiers should have the right to go around and carry on unlawful killings, but that law was already settled. What Hermer and Starmer did together was to really push the boundaries of that law and set up an architecture. And this is what these lawyers are extremely effective at doing. And the Human Rights Act is a good example of this, is setting up architecture that sort of sets up the legal landscape long after they're gone. Okay, so I think the case eventually did say that the European Convention of Human Rights would apply to foreign battlefields, and that, my understanding from military quotes, is that this has had a huge chilling effect in terms of recruiting for the British Army, and is essentially limiting them in what they can do militarily.
Yeah. And that is a big problem. Let me just get you finally on the whole situation with Starmer, because, there is a legal aspect in a way to the way that he is kind of comporting himself, I suppose. He's acting as though he's a lawyer trying to figure out how to kind of maneuver himself into a position where he doesn't get blamed for anything, it seems to me. And he's hiding behind, definitions, hiding behind, the sort of legal niceties. I don't think most people in this country now believe a word that he says, and when he talks about not knowing about something, it sounds iffy, doesn't it? It sounds as though, well, you've sort of set up a framework which made it possible for you not to know, even though you kind of did know. I mean, I've likened it in the past to, newspaper editors who didn't know that there were certain practices going on because nobody told them that there were certain practices going on which enabled them to get stories. And whenever they asked the news editor what was going on, the news editor said, "You don't want to know." It feels like that, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I assume you're talking in relation to Morgan McSweeney and Mandelson.
Yes.
Morgan McSweeney, also a fellow Irishman, by the way, all the way over from Cork. He's had an extraordinary journey. He went over there at 18 and worked his way up. But essentially,
I found him to be very unimpressive yesterday, though, didn't you?
Well, it depends on your point of view. I mean, he seemed to contain the situation, from, I mean, Starmer will be happy. Look, McSweeney is actually, not that I'm defending him, but he's credited with pulling the Labour Party more to the right. Actually, Starmer, as we've already discussed, was the human rights lawyer, very left wing, very pro immigration, and it was McSweeney supposedly that have said you got to get in touch with your working class base, which actually Irish living over there would have traditionally voted Labour, who have very serious concern about immigration. But in terms of what the problem for Starmer is he was elected, right, because he was boring. We were told, yes, he was boring, yes, he was dull, but he's a lawyer and he's competent and he's very big on the process and he's very big on the rules, and he's not going to be like that buffoon Boris Johnson with his all-night COVID parties. But now it turns out that the boring guy, the boring lawyer who, crosses every T and dots every I didn't know, right? I didn't know anything. They kept me in the dark. Look, well, you can't have it both ways. I mean, you're either the boring, competent lawyer, the adult in the room, right? That was Andrew Marr, or you're just foolish and ignorant and naive, and everybody's running around behind your back and knows loads of stuff that Mandelson's completely unsuitable, and he ends up being appointed as anybody, as US ambassador. How anybody could think he would pass enhanced vetting? I mean, that's wishful thinking right there.
Well, one of the great sort of discoveries of the age, I think, for me, is Saoirse Eastwood, the woman who is from the Alliance Party in Northern Ireland, who's been great, actually, in Parliament, who came out yesterday and said, everybody knows Peter Mandelson wouldn't have passed the vetting process for a kids' football team, which is entirely nailing it. It's one sentence, done, that's it, the end. You never mind about all the apologies and how I didn't know this, they didn't tell me that, he couldn't tell him, he didn't know, nobody's sure if he passed it, nobody knows if he passed it to him. It's ridiculous. Nobody believes a bloody word of it anymore. And what it turns out is that he's, yes, boring, incredibly boring, but also now incompetent and boring, which is about the worst mix of anything you could have.
Yeah, your choice is either you knew and therefore you misled Parliament and have to resign, or you're unbelievably incompetent. I mean, okay, well then you should also resign. Look, it does amaze me that he is still there. Of course, I think the problem for the rebels behind him is that they don't have an alternative leader. Actually, again, your last guest said another woman. She's correct in that. The whole team over there were really happy with the previous female US ambassador right? But for some reason, it amazes me the attraction Peter Mandelson has to people. It's just flabbergasting, right? But they wanted to get rid of her and put in this high risk individual. It's the level of incompetence just in terms of making that switch is actually kind of scary.
It is, and it left me, as I said to Sarah Pochin, wondering why any part of government actually works, and you can see why it doesn't. If these are the kind of ways that it does business, that they've got this tranche of civil servants who are so pompous and up their own backsides that they can't actually explain anything. And they don't want to explain anything.
I think the problem now over there is that the civil servants now are so terrified, right? They get fired. I mean, to fire Ollie Robbins instead of walking yourself is that, they don't write anything down. They're absolutely crippled by legal advice. And again, it just comes down to, it means like nothing gets done. And in fairness to Rishi Sunak, he had an excellent piece in the Times a couple of days ago, just explaining how if this just leads to more improvement of process, Starmer as a lawyer, that will be his default position. It's just going to slow everything down even more, it's such a drag. It's a drag on getting anything done in terms of infrastructure, social welfare reform, immigration reform. It's just the civil service is then paralysed, because if they think they're going to get fired for what is essentially a political judgment, as McSweeney himself said yesterday, then no one's going to take. Why make any hard decisions?
Yeah, exactly. Laura, great to see you. Great to have you on the show. We must do it more often. Thank you very much indeed. Laura Perrins there, reporting into us, Dublin and London, barrister and member of the media, of course, as well. Now, we've got a big treat for you coming up, but I'm not sure what we're doing, so I'm going to have to check with Pooch. Lewis Schaefer is here. He's going to talk to us about the King's visit to America, your homeland. And I know you're going to have plenty to say about it, but we've got a super chat here from Ray. Greetings, Mike, from sunny Pokey. Yeah, I've seen that before. It's not a real place, is it? North Korea. Are we switching over?
So we're going to switch over, yeah.
So today we're going to go back to what we were doing before this week, which is switching over to UK Live, which we're going to do momentarily when we can do Pooch's Pooch, I presume, over there. We can do a couple of other bits and bobs as well. We can speak to Lewis Schaefer about the King, who he has previously been, what can only be described as slightly derisory about, to be fair. So we'll find out whether he still believes that. But we're going to switch over. We've had a few technical issues today. I'm not sure whether Pooch is just having a bad day or whether there's a bit of jiggery pokery. Let's have a look. Let's switch over now to UK Live, and we'll see you.